You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
This month's Centresteer podcast is sponsored by Commonwealth Classics. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic vehicles from Europe and South America and has a rotating collection of rare and unique Land Rovers. Their showroom is located in Virginia, just 45 minutes from Washington, D.C. Visit www.cwclassics.com to view their current inventory of classic vehicles. The Centresteer Podcast, a Land Rover podcast by Land Rover owners. Welcome to the Centresteer Podcast, the first Land Rover podcast on the planet. Centresteer is a podcast by, for, and about Land Rover owners. This is show number 70 for January 2019. Happy New Year to everybody out there. I can't believe it's 2019 January already. I'm your host, John Costage, near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Almost not, actually.
Almost not what?
Almost not January anymore.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yes, yes, it's very close to the end.
I can't believe it's almost February.
And that's Harold joining me via Skype. And also making return engagements is Michael and Morgan. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you.
We're back. Thanks.
Apparently, rumors of your demise had been exaggerated.
Yes.
Well,
unfortunately.
I'm very glad you guys are rejoining us. It's nice to have you. You missed probably nothing.
I don't know about that, but
hey, they were good shows. I listened to them.
Oh, that's no good. Oh, there we go. Good deal.
Huh, so we did have a listener.
Michael, why have you stopped with your weekly newsletter?
I had technical issues to start with, and then other just personal, family, etc. issues crept in. It will be restarting. Should be this week.
Wonderful.
So it was not intentional stoppage.
No, I understand completely about life getting in the way.
It was that Lucas computer I bought.
I was just asking if your stoppage was a Brexit issue.
Well, not since I'm on this side of the pond, no.
Well, considering what you get paid for producing that, right?
Exactly.
Exactly.
No, it was one of those
labors of love.
It's labor of love, but it was an unintentional stoppage for a short span that just continued to go.
Right. You got into that. The habit was broken, and then you got into the habit of not doing it.
That's exactly what happened.
I understand. Yes.
And then you go, well, before I start back, I need to do this, and I need to do this, and I need to do this.
And that's why I never want to take a break, like even once, from doing the podcast, because then you worry it'll start happening. You're like, well, we missed that one. It's okay.
I will tell you, it's nice all the people who have asked, where is it? Why isn't it here? Why isn't it? So that's always a good feeling to know, hey, wait, I was missed by somebody.
We missed you.
Oh,
yes.
That makes me all warm and fuzzy.
Our guest this month is a multiple Land Rover owner from the United Kingdom, Sam Watson, and he has overlanded primarily in the Middle East and Africa. He has been posting very cool photos to Instagram for a number of years and was an early listener to the show, and finally we had an opportunity to speak with him so he can tell us about his adventures. That's coming up later in the show.
He got peer pressured by his friend and our previous guest, Malcolm.
There is that. That's true. He is friends with Malcolm Nance, and so it was helpful that since Malcolm came on the show, he was able to help us get Sam on the show. I'd asked Sam repeatedly, and it never happened until we got Malcolm involved.
That's that Nance effect.
The Nance effect. A very special thank you to our Patreon patrons, and your support really does help, as I have just paid for our domain management and web hosting bill. Just came in, so that's all been paid for. And you can, if you wish to be a Patreon patron yourself, go out to patreon.com/Centresteers. All the details are out there. The podcast online store is up and running. I know people have used it, and so I know it's running. If you do put an order in because you want to show your support for the show with either a T-shirt or a sticker, please email just to make sure that I know about your order, and that's shop@centresteer.com. Thank you for your comments, likes, follows, all those fun things on the social medias, especially a couple emails that we got this month. I did hear from one person who listened to the show last month all the way through, but it doesn't count because you may recall we said if anybody was forced to listen to the show all the way through because they're not normally a listener, we'd send them a sticker. Unfortunately, this listener was already a listener. Does that make sense? So it doesn't count, but he did listen all the way through.
did he still feel forced to listen all the way through? That's the question.
I did not get that. That was not the impression.
So there
Morgan.
are people who listen to the podcast at gunpoint.
I hope not. That's not why we're here.
No, it's not gunpoint. They strap you down to a chair, and then they put those little toothpick clamps under your eyelids to hold them open, and then they turn the volume up, and you have no choice.
Oh, okay.
And then they show like Rover snuff flicks while you listen to it.
What's that movie?
The point,
Clockwork Orange. But
There,
yeah.
thank you. There you go.
the point, Michael, was last month we had that long discussion with Jeff Aronson, put it out right before the holidays, so that if anybody was traveling, they could give them opportunity to listen during their travel, their commute to the family or to friends for the holidays. And we said that shout out to anybody who has to listen to the show because they're a spouse or a partner or a friend of the listener who's driving the vehicle. That was the point of that.
In other words, my wife should claim the sticker because I think I did that to her.
See, there we go. Okay, see, look at that. So you made your wife listen to the show?
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah.
And what'd she say?
Not a lot.
Is that a good?
Wifely silence.
I take it that's a bad thing.
Yeah, actually. She was like, "This is what you do every month."
This is where our money is going.
Yes, exactly.
Do you make her read newsletters too? I mean, that's
Actually, it's one of the easiest way for me to have her not pay attention to something I do is for me to put it in my own newsletter.
nice.
Nice.
Yeah. She's like, yeah, by the fact that you're my husband, I don't have to read this.
So pretty much what you're trying to tell us is this is your safe space.
That's exactly it.
Yes.
That's-
Well, as you can tell her, it's better than having a drug habit.
So it's about the same.
Yeah, maybe it's about the same. Dan from Australia sent us more photos of his Defender. He was out on the trail with a couple Toyotas, so thanks to Dan for sending those over. It was pretty cool, actually.
Glad to see he stepped out of the bog hole.
And I got a special email from a special listener, and I think he's now a new listener. I will read you the email in its entirety. Gentlemen, I just listened to your interview with Bristol and enjoyed it very much. I am the current custodian of the Grizzly Torque. Both Bristol and Bob have been wonderful to work with and made the restoration and subsequent videos very enjoyable. We are still hoping to take it around the world a second time. You were correct about the windscreen opening being a pilchard extra. Also, the driver's and passenger windows rolled up, something Land Rover didn't accomplish until they brought out the Range Rover. The artwork on the side of the vehicle was produced from actual recreated paintings Bob did on 6-inch by 6-inch cards, which we made transfers of, and then he went around and painted over them. Not totally original, but we do have his original paintings should we need to recreate one in the future. So while most of us touch up our Land Rovers with Rust-Oleum, this has 19 Robert Bateman paintings on it, making it certainly one of the most valuable paint jobs around here. In your podcast, you mentioned a bird. I have attached a picture from the second owner of Grizzly Torque, who currently runs a research center at Ayers Rock in Australia. Bill is also a naturalist and has raised an eagle from a fledgling and used it to accompany him in the Grizzly Torque. Bill's brother would complain as they were rounding curves through mountain roads. The eagle's beak, because I know where this is going, the eagle's beak would brush his ear. We talked about
It's better than pecking at him.
Exactly. If you looked at any of the Grizzly Torque photos there's a bird, this big black bird. We thought it was the original bird that was with it. Turns out I think it's this eagle bird. And then Stuart concludes, love the podcast. First of many I hope to enjoy. Best regards, Stuart Longacre. Hopefully we'll get him on the show. I did invite him. Haven't heard back from him. So Stuart, you are verbally, if you're listening, you are verbally welcome to come on to the show. We want to hear about how you restored Grizzly Torque.
So when he says that this was the first of many, does that mean this is the first one he's listened to or the first one he's actually enjoyed of the ones he's listened to?
Don't scare him off, Harold. Don't scare him off. Also remind you that our listener, Rovator, his name is Abel, is a self-admitted tinker, designer, and adventurer, and he has manufactured Range Rover classic winch trays. He's offered to help the podcast as I'm looking to buy a new microphone here in the main studio, and he's going to donate $80 from the sale of his winch trays. Trays are $480 American plus shipping, and there will be a link to the trays in the show notes, or you can find him, Rovator, on Instagram. And so if you're in the market for a Range Rover Classic winch tray, check out Abel's, and you can also help with the podcast too. So thanks to Abel for his generosity. And finally, a new segment we're starting, listener questions, or maybe is it answers to listeners' questions. We haven't come up with a title yet, but we do have our...
we were also playing around with Stump the Technician.
Ooh, Stump the Technician. Maybe that's it. Maybe we'll call it Stump the Technician. So we Instagram listener... A listener who contacted us through Instagram, he now owns a D90 that was imported from Italy, I believe. It has been in the U.S. for a number of years. It spent its time, I understand, in the Southwest, and it now resides in Cleveland. If you're not familiar with Cleveland, it is along Lake Erie, which is the largest freshwater lakes in the world, and they get a lot of snow there, especially in the wintertime. So his question is...
Yeah, and they don't call that area the Rust Belt for nothing.
that's why I got that name, right? So he has garaged it for the winter because he is concerned about the frame and the rusting. So his question is, what does he need to do to winterize and protect the frame for future winters?
Well, it's a good question. And for starters, we need to know what kind of shape the frame is in to begin with, because it's already rusty. There's not a lot you can do except maybe slow down that rust. But assuming it's in good shape, you need to look at coating the outside with something. Undercoating works well. Not a fan of the wax oil products that are all over England and other places because they're too hard and brittle. I like something a little more rubberized. Good undercoating. The real problem is that frames tend to rust from the inside out because they never bother to put end caps on them. So at that point, you kind of need a professional with tools to get down inside and spray a good coating on the inside of the frame.
Is that something that he could do himself?
Well, like I said, you need professional grade tools if you really want to do a good job. And so, yeah, if he wants to buy tools.
Are there holes in the frame that to accomplish that, or do you have to put in extra holes?
There are some holes. Plus, like I said, the ends of the frame tend to be, at the back end, tend to be open. That's why the back end rusts out first. And the real problem is the cross member. The front side of the rear cross member is perfectly positioned to catch all the road spray, and that's wide open. It's not sealed up, and it sucks the crap in, and then it funnels it straight down the frame rails. It's just, yeah, in my mind, it's a bad design, and so the stuff I work on, that gets fixed. But yeah, I mean, get in there as best you can with as much undercoating as you can get, and if you can get something with a nozzle that you can insert down in there and squirt, go for it.
Now, would he need a specialty garage, a specialty Land Rover garage, or would any of the your standard garages that do undercoating and sealing be sufficient?
Any place that does undercoating and rust proofing and that kind of stuff should be able to help you out. But I will tell you, the first line of defense is just to wash all the mud off of it. Keep it clean. And that you can do even before you worry about your undercoating, because the problem is you get mud in there, that holds water like a sponge and it traps everything. So the cleaner you can get it and the cleaner you can keep it, the better it'll be, whether it's been undercoated or not.
Is it okay to take a power washing wand and put it into the frame then to blow out all the? I guess there's no hole in the other end to push it all out, though, right?
It finds a way out.
Okay, so it is okay then.
I've done it.
Yeah. Okay, so it is okay to take a power wash wand or something.
Depending on the condition, there may be plenty of holes anyway.
That's true.
Right.
Yeah, I think the specific frame when he said was in decent shape, but this is a good question I think for anybody really.
Well, if you park it facing uphill, a steep enough incline, and you spray it up in there, it will come back out.
Good idea. Yeah, just spray it until all the gook comes out, till water runs clean. Really.
Yeah, and of course, if you have, depending on where it's been stored and where it's been sitting, for instance, your 110, John, there was a significant nest inside of it, inside the frame. Bits of British newspaper that have been dragged in there for the nesting material and straw and everything else. Yeah, that was fun. And that doesn't really hose out all that well, and that would have caused a problem over time.
Any other winterization general tips, for say, protecting other parts? Is there something maybe unique to a Defender that help winterize?
No, not that I'm coming up with.
All right. Just
I don't think there's anything really specific about this. I think all the things I'm talking about would hold true to pretty much any kind of vehicle. Well, I mean, obviously references to the frame don't work on something that's unibody, but the ideas are the same.
Okay.
And keeping it clean. And my dad used to do this when we were kids. You know, after every snowstorm, once the roads got cleared up, he'd go get it washed, get all the salt washed off, and spend the extra couple bucks and get the undercarriage washed. Washing off the top side doesn't help preserve the stuff underneath.
And I've also noticed lately there's some municipalities putting ash and maybe sand into their winterization tools and you know, the anti-skid that they put down, and those can also kind of collect into the brakes and cause problems. So it's always a good opportunity to make sure that that's not getting in between your brake pads and
yeah, just keep washing it. People don't think about that. Just keep washing it. Wash it frequently, and wash it thoroughly.
So if you have a general question and you want to try to stump Harold or whatever we're calling the segment, not just sure yet, just go ahead and message us and try to get you an answer. Let's move into the news. So it took us about a half hour to get to get the podcast started, partly because there was so much news and it changed so much in the last month. So we're going to try to work ourselves through this. I'm going to start out with thanks to our friends at justbritish.com.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Thanks, Michael. Has put together, has their JLR World Report Worldwide 2018 sales. Geez, this the last time we recorded was right before the holidays, and from that time, I'll just give everybody like the overview of what's happened. You had Land Rover right after Christmas, before the New Year, had a reveal of the Defender, I guess 110 we'll call it for now.
Semi-reveal.
Thank you. Yes, semi-reveal.
Heavily cladded and camoed and everything.
A disguised reveal.
And then reports of wonderful sales for, it seemed like Land Rover was recovering, but at the same time, very quickly, it seemed like in days, all of a sudden you started to hear that Land Rover was going to keep plants closed and lay off more people. And then Tata stock price seemed to be going up because the JLR recovery was a good idea. But then we get to the end of the month, and there's discussion is Jaguar going to be shut down? Is Land Rover going to leave the UK? So that's like the overarching month of what's gone on here. But we'll start with JLR 2018 worldwide sales. And it's important to note that JLR's if their fiscal year, their financial year ends first quarter of the calendar month, so they're now entering in their fourth quarter. So 2018 is not their fiscal year, just to be clear.
So that means their fiscal new year is April Fool's Day.
Yes.
JLR retail sales in 2018 totaled 592,708 vehicles, down 4.6% compared to 2017's record year. So that's his total number of vehicles produced, almost 600,000. The introduction of the Jag E-Pace and I-Pace led to Jaguar's best ever annual sales results in 2018, up 1.2% to over 180,000 units. However, there was more than an offset by market weakness in China impacting on sales of established models. The lower sales in China, down almost 22%, were partially offset by stronger sales in North America, up 7.2%, and overseas, 7.3%. Weaker market conditions, primarily relating to diesel and Brexit, also weighed in on sales in the UK, which was down 1.5%, and Europe down 7.8%. Although, I have to say, Michael, I did read some other there's another article, I don't know if I kept it, that said that UK sales in December were gangbusters.
Well, these numbers are from JLR, so
yeah, and then you have a nice chart.
It's like this stuff has been produced by the Ministry of Truth or something.
Well, exactly.
It's definitely
how do you spin statistics?
That's exactly it. You'll notice I've read some of these, and they'll say Jaguar did really great in November, and then you read a little later, and Land Rover didn't do so well.
Well, and it's also whether they always do it, whether it's compared to the month prior, whether it's compared to the year prior.
Right.
It's how they want to spin it.
That's exactly it. So reading this further, because I think this was helpful, retail sales for the month of December, this is just the December, were down 52,000 units, which is 6.4% year on year. So this is the same month compared year to year. Mm-hmm. China was down 42% for the month of December 2018 compared to 17. So that happened there. And JLR generated strong December retail sales in North America. We set up almost 22%. Europe was up 7.6%. The UK was up 7.8%. 7.8. So the UK I think the UK's being up 7.8 was December 18 to December 17, but they were down for the year so far in the UK. Right. Yeah, right. And overseas markets for month to month comparing was down almost 10%. Things all over the place. Land Rover retailed in December almost 36,000 units, and that was down 11% year to year. The view of the company and sales, as we said, there were record U.S. sales for JLR in the U.S. That was their best month ever, I believe, if I read this right. They were up, as I said, to almost 24% in the U.S. Land Rover had another, record year of sales with 92,000 plus cars sold for the year. This is calendar year in the U.S. is up 23%. And it does say that Range Rover Sport and Range Rover had record-breaking years. Range Rover Sport was 24,000 units and Range Rover was 19,000 units. I wonder if the Range Rover includes the Velar, because I don't see any Velar mentions here.
It should.
But then why would you break out the Sport then? If you break out the Sport, you think you would break out the Velar, but
unless you didn't want to focus on those numbers for some reason.
I'm going to say that's the case. I'll bet you the Velar didn't sell as well as they expected. That's probably why they didn't talk about it, because they would break that out.
Yeah.
Interesting stat here that I had never seen before. It ends this article. In 2017-2018, JLR sold 614,000 cars in 129 countries, with more than 80% of vehicles being sold abroad. Keep that. Okay. Well, just keep that in mind as all these other things get discussed and home market and all. At the end of the year of 2018, this article came out. What does 2019 hold for JLR? And it said that 2018 had been a rough year. 2019 is set to be even tougher. And this all around the usual things of electrification, new models coming out, switching over to Slovakia, Brexit, the trade issues with China, and diesel discussions. So all that's out there.
The electrification is something, obviously, we've discussed numerous times in the past. And recently, there have been a number of new competitors added to that market that would specifically compete with Land Rover. I'm blanking on the names off the top of my head, but just within the last month or so, two new pickup truck and SUV lines have been announced that are pure electric.
Oh, it's not just I think you're thinking of Bollinger out of New York, but the big car companies, the massive car companies, are moving quickly into electrification, especially Volkswagen. Volkswagen has a competitive vehicle that they think is going to compete with the new Defender. All the other car companies are starting to move towards it.
The question is, once VW starts going all electric, are we going to have to call them Volkswagens?
Yes, probably.
It's just shocking.
But no, there are actually two new entries to the electric vehicle market. One of them, I'm searching for them right now.
Is that the Bollinger?
No, the Bollinger has been out for, well, not out, but announced for a few years now. But
not a few years, but it's been like
long enough. We've talked
several months.
It's been at least a year.
But it's not in production either. It's coming up, and late last year they announced the 4-door model of that.
Right. Well, one of the newest ones is the Rivian. They have the R1T, which is their pickup truck, and then they also have an SUV. I think it's the R1S, and that one's actually supposed to be first to the market. And I think it's like 2021 or something that they're supposed to launch. And then there's another one as well. Can't remember the name of that one. So yeah, there's a couple that were just announced within the last month or so and are actually going to be first to market.
And General Motors is moving quickly into electrification. Also, they're starting to ramp up in that space, even though the Volt, their General Motors Volt has gone out of production. They're moving heaven and earth these days.
Ford is too, even coming out with an all-electric, large pickup truck. So.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, because they can't sell cars, and it's hard enough to sell electric. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Start with the pickup trucks and then move down to the cars.
Well, you're gonna. I think
It's backwards, but
well, it's not necessarily backwards. I think the trucks actually have more space to put in batteries, and they're just generally a bigger vehicle, so you can get more range.
Well, and most people don't go long distances in their trucks. Mm-hmm. They use them. If you look at a lot of that market, they're very local usage versus long haul people driving long distances in cars.
Right.
Most people who buy half-ton trucks don't even use them as trucks.
It's true.
Well, these days, yeah.
Well, and that's why Ford's getting out of cars in the U.S. I mean, that people aren't buying sedans. It's just not happening.
Trucks are selling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Well, it's because the cars aren't big enough. So you buy a truck, that's your big car.
So back to this article, Spied, said that there were concerns and coming up, and he started to. You've heard, I know you've heard this, but we just reference it that he's said that the Brexit, whether there's a bad deal or no deal, could be catastrophic for the company. Warnings intensified. He concluded that such a scenario could force production overseas and wipe out its profits. So dealing with the Brexit concern, and then there's also the falling demand for diesel cars. There's the issues, again, with China and its changing needs there. All the articles I read, they're not really sure what's going on in China, but it seems that it has to do with just changing tastes and possibly the trade war ramping up. Even though it's a kind of a U.S.-China trade war, it seems like the European car companies are taking a hit on it also. At least that's kind of my read on some of that. It's not kind of quite clear, but sales have definitely plummeted in China. I
can't imagine it's market saturation or anything with as many people as they have.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it says that, here's the specific, that Audi, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz are all suffering. It's blamed on three things: changes on tariffs on imported cars, which we've talked about. They reduced that tariff, the trade war with China, but they do say it's a murky situation. So that was going on. So this was the beginning of the month. I said that, 2018 had been bad. Maybe 2019 will be bad, and it may continue to be bad. There was some concern with those discussions about, as I had mentioned, that JLR might leave the UK. And so the chairman of Tata Sons came out and wrote a letter to Prime Minister May to tell her the company intends to carry on investing in the car maker over the next few years. They have 40,000 workers or so in the UK for that, and they said they were going to kind of continue to invest. So everybody was happy about that. A couple days later, though, Automotive News Europe came out with a very long article compared to other articles you generally read, which are usually just a couple paragraphs. Why JLR is losing money and how it plans to return to profit. And I thought I'm not going to read all of this, but if you're kind of interested in this, I thought it was a pretty good article, went through a lot of detail on the challenges and concerns in different areas, went through where their plants are, how many, the money's involved, a little more on the China crisis. So it's, excess capacity is one of the concerns. Land Rover has excess capacity that the Slovakia plant has, I think, if I remember the number correctly, it was something like the capacity for 300,000 vehicles. And their only Disco that is being produced there is like at 100,000. I think they're anticipating maybe 50,000 for the Defender. They assume it's going to go there. So there's still a lot of headroom there that they could use at the cheaper plants because it's cheaper there. And also you don't have, then if there is a Brexit, you don't have to worry about getting vehicles and parts in and out of the UK because they're already in Europe. And then there's this concern about Jaguar, and that this Automotive News Europe goes on to say about Jaguar has kind of missed itself, not stepping up, I guess, as quickly, staying in cars, which, we all understand that SUV seems to be the place to be. Jaguar try to update themselves and compete. Seems like they've been able to compete technically, but but BMW and Audi and Mercedes-Benz are still kind of beating them up, and Jaguar's not doing probably as well as it should. So there's some concern there that's going away. And this other article, when did this come out? Later in the month. Some concern that Jaguar might close down. And I think Tata had to say, no, we're not going to do that. It's not going to happen. But it's possible if Jag doesn't pick up and do as well as they need them to.
I think it would be more likely that they would move them, and they could be laying some of the framework for that. As I've discussed.
What do you mean move? What do you mean move them?
Move them out of the UK.
Oh, right.
I mean, I think some of this actually is political posturing and corporate posturing around the whole Brexit issue, and then laying the framework for, oh, well, that's why we moved production. Well, no, it's not because 79% of our market's overseas. It's because of the Brexit issue. And, so I think there's a whole lot of stuff. And I think that's also why some of these stories kept going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's, are we presenting a corporate position, or are we presenting sales numbers, or are we presenting a future? Are we talking about Jaguar corporate, or are we talking about Jaguar as it is to the UK? Or, it's like when we talk about Jaguar North America or JLR North America versus Jaguar worldwide, the Tatas could invest in Jaguar Land Rover and never put a cent into the UK, because there's other places to do that too. So it's like listening to politicians.
Well, right, and it sounds like there's enough capacity left over in Slovakia to handle Jag's production too, if they wanted to do that.
And even another car, they could either do a whole nother line or pieces of those lines, or.
Let me read this part of the article. It's a couple paragraphs, but I think it has to do with this excess capacity. One of those cracks is excess capacity in JLR's expanding production network. The Chinese downturn is coinciding with the opening of JLR's new factory in Slovakia, the expansion of its Chinese plant, the production start for Jag's E-Pace SUV and full electric I-Pace, which are both being made by contract manufacturer Magna Steyr, did I say that right, Harold? Mm-hmm. In Austria. Along with temporarily idling its Chinese plant, which I had not heard about, it was new, JLR has responded to falling demand by imposing a 3-day work week at its plant in Castle Bromwich, while in November, it cut 500 contract workers at its engine plant in Wolverhampton and another 500 at its Solihull factory. All 3 facilities are in central England. 3 industry specialists who spoke with Automotive News Europe believe JLR will end up shutting its Castle Bromwich site for good. One of these specialists said, quote, "It will be a shopping center within 5 years." The site is small, making about 50,000 vehicles a year, and the car it does build are Jaguar slow-selling sedans. The bigger question is, how do you build in Slovakia and keep both Halewood and Solihull? Solihull, home of the flagship Range Rover, lost the Land Rover Discovery when it moved to the new Slovakia plant late last year, while Halewood, a former Ford plant in northwest England, makes JLR's best-selling and newly replaced Evoque, as well as the Land Rover Discovery Sport. And it goes on to talk about that. Well, this is where I got that info about how it has 150,000 vehicles. Slovakia has 150,000 vehicles a year, with the potential to increase to 300,000 at its much lower cost base. Means it needs more work. And they think that it's possible that the XE and the XF might go away. There you go. Any thought?
Well, I disagree. I think it's going to be an apartment complex, not a shopping mall.
That's flats. It would be flats.
Yes, it would be flats, like they did to the MG factory in Abingdon. But anyway.
I agree.
To your point about kind of like the political nature and the churning of the waters and saying things that may be, just for kind of public consumption and may not be reality. I've seemed to have noticed too that they have Spied come out and say the bad things, and then the Lord Masters back in India, the Tatas are the ones that say everything will be fine. Everything will be fine.
Because you never want the people from out of country to say the bad things.
That's it.
Because that's going to give you a really bad taste. Mm-hmm. You want your home team to say the bad things,
especially if your home team is run by a guy from Germany.
That's right.
Well, where they know how to get down
BMW.
To it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also think it's just the nature of that. You have the operational guy, the guy doing the business. While he's in charge, he's not ultimately in charge. So he can say, we might do this or we might do that. And then if it doesn't work, then the Tatas can say, well, we overrode him, or it was a bad decision, and they can get rid of him or condemn him.
The real question is, what does Jerry McGovern think of it all?
I have not heard Jerry's name in
are we
3
going
months.
to like it?
Not one of those stories mentioned his name.
Never.
None of that stuff
Nope.
did.
Yeah, we've had a very Jerry-free month here.
And when we get to the new Defender, and we will, not once was Jerry's name mentioned in any of that. I saw Spied's name mentioned.
I don't think Jerry's involved in it anymore.
I agree. I said that a couple months ago. I think they cut him out.
They told him to go sit at the kids' table. Let the grown-ups handle this.
I think so.
Are you saying that his design is not saving Land Rover and
no, I think
JLR.
I think they took Defender away from him. I think that he was going down that path, and I think they took it away from him when the DC 100 didn't work. They got a lot of BS from it. Personally, believe they took it away from him.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. And then he might be involved
he probably said, well, fine, I'll wash my hands of it, and so when it fails, it's not my fault or whatever. Because,
right.
Yeah, it's probably a bit of both sides going, it's yours, I'm not doing it anymore, and you get away from this.
Yeah, and it may not be that heavy-handed.
Really,
either.
I think that the acid test will be once they finish showing us what it really looks like, get off all the development camo and the extra cladding and stuff. Can we tell it apart from the other products?
Mm-hmm.
If
we can, then he didn't have a hand in it.
Exactly.
Yes. Or I would say this: the hand he had in it continued, because I have no evidence, I have no inside knowledge, nothing special. It's my personal belief. He probably did help style it. Any styling that continues from that seems to be Jerry-esque in the whatever the new Defender is, I think was yes, his hand was in it, but I think that was maybe a year ago when they probably cut him out, and it just happened to continue because they liked it, or it made the cut, so to speak. I don't know that you will be able to definitively say, unless they tell us, that Jerry didn't have a hand in this, because I think he did. It's that they probably phased him out, or they started, he wasn't invited to meetings anymore, like, hey, Jerry, hey, your team took care of this. Says, what do you think? You okay with this? Good. This is what the bonnet's going to look like.
They fixed some of his designs, in other words.
Back to business news, because again, there was a lot of it, and I think it's still important to talk about because it does affect the future. So we heard about 2018 being a bad year, but then it seems like December things were starting to rebound, and because of the strong sales in the UK, Tata's stock went up, and which was a good thing. I think the reason for that, they say here, is it reported better than expected UK sales. They were up, and then the stock went up like 7% for Tata. So it was a good sign. But then a couple days later, JLR confirms 4,500 job cuts. This was January 10th. They are out of 40,000 strong in the UK, 4,500 jobs. We cut most. It will be in office roles as the company wants to simplify its management structure. The cuts come on top of last year's 1,500 job losses, and we all know what the issues we're facing. We already know about all those.
Yeah,
we are
4,500 jobs is a little more than a minor simplification.
Space says we are taking decisive action to help deliver long-term growth in the face of multiple geopolitical and regulatory disruptions, as well as technology challenges facing the automotive industry. This is a BBC article, and they took from JLR a graphic that shows all the plants and what they do and where their operations are worldwide. So that was there's the Hallwell, Wolverhampton, Solihull, Fenend, Warwick, Stone, Castle Bromwich, Whitley, Brighton, London, and Gaydon. That's where their sites are. That doesn't necessarily mean they're physical plants, but they're sites for something. Then worldwide, they have Portland, Austria, Brazil, 2 sites in China, Pune in India, of course, Slovakia, and something going on in Shannon, Ireland. There was that. Then it was quiet for a couple weeks. And January 22nd, JLR could close in no-deal Brexit. Government minister has warned JLR could close if the UK leaves the EU with no Brexit deal. And I think they also said that Mini could also close, and as part of that, Mini also has a major plant in Oxfordshire. That's all in play.
But now those two articles about Mini and about JLR, those were actually politicians saying that. So those I actually credit far less than sort of official words. I really think that, this is just me, is fear-mongering about the whole Brexit thing, because I really don't see them moving production out of England, which to that politician would be closer to reality than I think closing.
I give you that.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, especially Mini, actually, but that's a whole different issue. But especially Mini. Mini's not going anywhere. That's BMW.
Right. They can always build those in Germany.
Yeah, or
the
US or anywhere. Yeah.
Well, they do build them in Germany, so it's they just consolidate their production.
Yeah, they put the production components and all that. So
further on, this Minister Richard Harrington, Minister, Department of Energy, Business, Energy, and Industrial Strategy, told the BBC, quote, "I'm afraid of Jaguar closing, Mini closing, the life sciences industry closing, and all the other things," unquote.
Yeah, that kind of goes. Yeah,
I know. No, I agree with you that it is a bit of fear mongering, but there also may be reality to it too. You can't, at the same time, you can't just simply say, "Well, that's fear mongering" completely.
No, I know. I mean,
because it may be legit. Maybe he may know inside stuff or has talked to these guys, and they're like, "Hey, if this doesn't get settled, we're going to have these transportation problems. We're going to have these parts import problems or export problems,
have logistic problems." And they could have easily said, we're out of here, which to him is closing.
Right. Exactly. And it may take a year or it may take 5 years, but it could happen. Yeah. So I just think it's worth mentioning that it's out there. It affects what we like and what we enjoy, and our hobby, I suppose. So it's at least to be aware that it's out there. So that's general Land Rover strategy news, which I suspect some people dislike hearing about, but again, it's good to keep on top of it because we'll talk about the new Defender soon, and it directly affects that. And then JLR has confirmed battery manufacturing plans amid all its job cuts. JLR, which is Britain's largest vehicle manufacturer, has reaffirmed its commitment to battery manufacturing plans despite laying off about 10% of its workforce. Later this year, the next generation electric drive units, EDU, will be produced at the company's engine manufacturing center in Wolverhampton, the company said in a statement. These will be batteries assembled at the new JLR Battery Assembly Center located at Hams Hall, North Warwickshire, reinforcing the company's commitment to the West Midlands. We're not leaving. Okay, I'm sorry.
Good to hear just that they are making some headway in that area.
Yeah.
Because having some electrification in your fleet it's not significant if you don't have a good battery business as well.
Correct. And this article also, and everywhere I saw, was the continuing mention and discussion that they are committed to electrification of all the vehicles, including the new Defender. And then here in the U.S., JLR has lost its trademark case infringement case over the Defender name. The company had been seeking $130 million from Bombardier Recreational Products over its Can-Am Defender off-road vehicle. A Detroit jury was persuaded that there is no likelihood of consumer confusion over the names. And I'm not paying for National Law Journal, so that's all I have to tell you, just a headline.
Yeah, I think the products are significantly different. I think it would be very difficult to confuse one for the other. I mean, one's an actual motor vehicle that you can drive on the street and you have to put license plates on. The other one is an off-road toy.
Yeah, and I think that was also one of those examples of just having to defend your trademark. So you have to lose it.
Yeah.
Right.
Although I disagree with you, Harold, that they're both can be considered off-road vehicles, and I think some of those larger ATVs or whatever we're calling them these days, some of them are plated and are more than just toys. They're used extensively, as
from what I
workhorses.
Understand of this particular vehicle, it's not.
Well, at least the picture they show here has got a surfboard on top, and it's you can seat two people, and it's got the little deck out the back, and there's a plate on the front.
Yeah, it may vary state by state. Around here, we have plenty of people who plate ATVs of various types so that they can use them for small amounts of on-road use.
Do you have roads in Vermont? Sorry.
Some.
Sorry. Take a shot. I apologize.
We even have some paved ones, yeah.
Yeah, and they both go north and south, right?
They do. Don't try going east-west on a paved road. There aren't any. Yeah, on the defending the Defender name aspect, especially since Land Rover has not produced a Defender in the United States for so long, it really probably was extremely important for them to attempt to do so.
Right, at least establish a precedent.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, we tried. We took them to court and we tried. Yeah. I agree with you there. Yeah. I bet you if they were not going to bring it back, they wouldn't have cared. There was no need for them to worry about it. Speaking of the new Defender, right after the holidays, I think it was December 27th, if I'm not mistaken, the new Defender was revealed in the U.S. And they were trying to make a big announcement that the Defender is coming back to North America, the U.S. and Canada. And it's been like 23 years since it was here, and it will go on sale in this year, 2019, as a 2020 model. Oh, that may go on sale next year. I think it's going to go on sale in 2020. And there's a video with it to reveal that, and they showed it in ice and in high temperatures and in heat. So it was kind of doing this camo, looks like a 110-ish looking model. 4-door was undergoing some testing, and they made sure we all knew about it.
Yeah, I think they've said 2020, and they're still talking about will it be revealed 2019 or 2020. So they're still not even saying you're going to see it this year, although I think we will.
I think I did see somewhere that it's supposed to be revealed in 19.
Yeah.
With that.
Yeah, they did say that they're going to reveal more throughout the year. So that wasn't their only semi-reveal.
Yeah.
They will remove a piece of the camo.
That's it every day.
At some point.
We'll take
one little stripe.
Actually, that's a really good idea. That's a
strip
really
poker with a Land Rover.
Yeah, so it's coming. It's coming back. Yes, this was Coventry Live said it will be tested in temperatures ranging from negative 120 degrees to 100 degrees Fahrenheit and at altitudes of more than 13,000 foot above sea level. They did get the vice president of marketing for JLR North America, Kim McCullough, involved, and she's in that video. And it's actually kind of neat to watch. It's only like 2 minutes, but you don't see much. You just there's more of the picture of the Statue of Liberty, I think, than how much you see the Defender. She does sit in it, and so you can see a little bit of the inside, but all you see is like out the window. So you can see like a B pillar and an A pillar, and that's about it.
But it's enough to recognize that it's not a scale model.
That's correct.
She's getting in and out of it.
No, she's in it. She's not getting in and out of it. She's in it. That's all. She's talking from inside of it. And she says that the Land Rover series vehicles, later known as Defender, have really represented the heart and soul of Land Rover. It's undergoing rigorous testing. Few vehicles are as loved. It's been a long time coming, but people will not be disappointed.
See, to me, those statements all are so very un-Jerry-like.
Except that the people will not be disappointed. That sounds vaguely Jerry.
Yeah.
She didn't.
But the rest of it, she gets it. She gets the heritage of it. That's the important thing.
And we know from Jeff Aronson that I think he's met her, and she has owned, I think, a Series 2, if I'm not mistaken. So she's kind of a Land Rover heritage person.
Well, that's definitely un-Jerry-like.
Yes.
Jerry wouldn't be caught dead in a Series 2.
They also showed it in enough different environments that you got to see suspension working and stuff like that. So it shows that it is a capable vehicle. And I've actually seen some analysis showing that people are like, oh, well, it's now independent rear suspension. You can see that in the footage, blah, blah, blah. They've got lots of little things here and there that
it's
they've
got
identified.
Short overhangs.
And more importantly, it actually has a suspension. It's just not a styling buck that's being dragged around in the woods for different photo ops.
Right.
And it's got short overhangs on both ends. The exhaust looks to be tucked up and out of the way. So there are some positives there, things that can be considered good for off-roading it, or
things a Defender should have.
Exactly. And it does say another article here, as you said, Morgan, new independent rear suspension should provide a more comfy ride on the road. The new Defender will reportedly launch with a 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo diesel. Don't know if that will be here in the U.S. or not. Indications are that it will not be a manual transmission, though. I have not seen anybody say. Since nothing has been said by Land Rover officially either way, I think folks are leaning towards there probably will not be a manual.
I don't think there's enough market anymore for a manual.
Yeah. I wouldn't see that. Yeah.
And I think the gains you get on fuel economy, which are kind of critical and important these days for selling, I don't think it's almost equal now with automatics.
Yeah, and I've actually seen a few automatics that are even rated higher, although I doubt that a skilled driver could not beat it with the skilled driver with a manual. But the thing is, those don't exist anymore. But
I was about to say, try to find one of those.
But the other thing is that, especially when it comes to trucks, towing capacity is actually higher with an automatic than it is with a manual, because the automatics change gears so much more smoothly than a manual does. A manual is much harder on the driveline in terms of torsional shock.
Well, and the way the new Land Rovers do so much computer control over the suspension and everything else, it would only make sense for it to be an automatic.
Well, and then you get to some of the down the road features like driver assist and self-driving features and stuff like that, and can't do that with a manual.
Yep.
Technically, you can.
You can. I have cruise control with a manual transmission.
Well, and you
that,
can have a transmission that does both. I mean,
I'm referring to the dual clutch transmission, which is actually a manual. It's just being run by a computer.
Right, that's true. Good point.
Yeah, I had a Ford Focus with one of those. I hated it.
Yeah, it's great in Formula One, not so much in ordinary street cars.
Normal Pittsburgh use. Then there was a long article, relatively speaking, of course, in Automobile Magazine. The new Defender needs to be great. And, of course, we knew that. But they did a nice job of saying where it's slotted and talking about some of the things that we've talked about over the last month or actually year or two since Defender stopped being produced is, the new Defender is not just a model by itself. Though we consider it an icon, it is not in isolation. It is, in fact, competing in the marketplace. And, it's competing with the latest Wrangler. It's going to compete with the Mercedes G-Class, the G-Wagon. And as we mentioned earlier, there's, even Volkswagen is coming out with something possibly soon. And
they're really competing against themselves, too, when you think about it. And there's so many other Land Rover models out there. But, if the Defender comes out and it's not great, they will have shot themselves in the foot with a 12 gauge because they've been pushing, for however many years now that, we're going to bring it out. We've got to make sure it's good. And we're taking our time to make sure it's good. We're taking our time to make sure it's great. You're going to love it. It's going to be appealing. It's going to be wonderful. And then to have it come out and be lame, that would be not good.
Yeah, it's fine and actually good for a company to cannibalize its own sales with a better, more popular product. But when you have something where you're trying to restore a classic, you can't fail on that.
Well, especially when you've been hyping it so much that you're going to do a good job with it and that you're devoted to the heritage of it. And to blow that is a big, big failure.
In this article, in reading it, I thought of how they like the Disco 4, and they were not particularly fans of the Disco 5. And then I'm thinking about this. I wonder if, the Disco 5 kind of has changed its general styling. Doesn't look like a Discovery as we would generally feel for it. So I'm wondering now if maybe will the new Defender, if it slots itself as like a Disco 4, would that might be okay? A little more on the rugged side.
Funny because I actually kind of see some Disco 4 lines in that.
I don't know how much
that's
said.
Exactly.
I don't know how much it's the cladding, but I'm seeing that shape in there. Like
especially
depending on how much
lights and so.
Yeah. I mean, depending on what's hiding underneath that stuff, but it might just look like that.
And people have come to like that shape. That the Disco 3, when it first came out, folks didn't really like it, but over time it seemed to be okay. And even the 4 was just a kind of an evolution of the 3. And I
can't tell the difference between the 3 and the 4.
Yeah,
really.
you have to look for
I play that game in traffic. Is it a 3 or a 4? And half the time I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's tough to tell.
I tend to judge by rust content more than anything else. How old and beat
that
up
would be
is
a
it?
Disco 2 or 1 for me.
Well, yeah, there'd be that. But
and then if you consider that it's probably going to be built on a Disco frame, so to and chassis, and it's already been undergoing platform. Thank you, and it's already been undergoing testing for a number of years. If you look at it that way, hopefully this will be, it won't coming out with this new model have gone through all of that kind of testing.
And I could almost accept that because I mean. For like we were saying, there's something to be said for that Disco 3-4 shape that they sort of abandoned with the Disco 5, and if this keeps that going, it's not entirely a bad thing.
Right.
Whether that's enough to merit it being the Defender, I don't know, but I don't know. I could almost live with that.
I mean, ultimately, Defender and what it is in the eye of the driver, because everybody comes into them different ways from different places, and it's ultimately who's actually going to buy them, who is the audience. And as we've said a number of times, I think the buyers are not us, because we already we like what we like, and we're not looking to buy brand new typically.
Well, yeah, we won't be the first owner of anything.
There we go. New Defender coming, as we know, and if you haven't already, which I assume you already have as a listener of the podcast, you've probably checked out all the photos already. Guess maybe just some comments on the photos I have seen. I generally like it. like what I've seen. I feel okay about it. I realize there's probably a little more angles to it than will be in actuality, especially I think around the bonnet. I think that's going to be a little more sloped than they show there. They purposely put that cladding there to distract you, but it does have a spare tire in the rear. It looks like the door will open from the side. As we mentioned previously, it has short overhangs on either end, and the exhaust is tucked up tight. So there's some things there I think that bode well. And also being on an existing platform that is known and has already undergone years of testing.
Well, and that is the tradition of the Defender anyway. Even if they robbed all the cool Range Rover stuff when they first came out with it. They took an existing product that had worked well for them, the series truck, and then they just upgraded it with Range Rover parts.
So, new Defender coming to the world sometime in our lifetime. We had mentioned already, but just an official article here that Volkswagen's cooking up a challenger for the Defender, and it's tentatively called the T-Rug.
No. Please no.
But there you go. Well, it makes sense. I mean, they've been moving. Look, everything's moving SUV, right? And Volkswagen's, I think, moving.
I've got no problem with the Volkswagen doing that. It's the name I don't.
Oh yeah,
it sounds like a bad hairpiece.
Yeah. Well, they have that Tiguan, Atlas is another name, and
Atlas is at least a word we've heard before. It's all these other things that they're sort of making up.
Yeah. We'll move into kind of new modelish news. The Discovery, they're going to celebrate Discovery's 30th birthday, their anniversary, in the UK. It's exclusive to the UK. Disco 5, they're going to make a special edition, the anniversary edition. It will add extra equipment to the standard Discovery SE, and they'll have some exterior goodies to mark it out. It will be available in a choice of Santorini black, chorus gray, Loire blue, Indus silver, all of which are paired to massive 22-inch sparkle silver alloy wheels.
Oh, they're doves.
God. It's based on the mid-spec Disco SE trim, which usually costs £57,000. The anniversary edition ups this to £60,000, but adds a bundle of extras that usually would cost $6,000. I think I misread this. Yes, it normally costs £57,000. The anniversary edition is going to go up by £3,000, but they're going to give you £6,800 of stuff, of extras. So the alloy wheels, paintwork, a fixed panoramic glass roof, privacy glass in the rear, and an upgraded sound system.
Yeah, will the upgraded sound system suck, is the question.
If it uses their current infotainment system, yes.
And will the panoramic sunroofs leak?
No. Those are not.
They're fixed.
Not leaks.
They're fixed.
That is not a panoramic sunroof. That is a scenic automatic foot washer.
That's
just adding water.
Get wet. The rest of me that gets wet.
You can get a shower while driving, so you're refreshed when you arrive at your destination.
Yeah.
The new 2019 Land Rover Discovery Sport spartans up with some Evoque polish and hybrid tech. So the 2019 is getting, as I said, Disco Sport's getting a makeover similar to the Evoque. They caught this in northern Sweden undergoing cold weather testing. I know they've got the camo. It's tough to tell. It looks like a Disco Sport. Doesn't seem to be much there, but I think it's underneath is where it was updated. D8 architecture brings the plug-in hybrid tech already showcased on the new Evoque. It will be positioned at the top of the Disco Sport range with prices to match, lithium-ion batteries, 11,000 kilowatt batteries are packaged below the floor and feed an 80 kilowatt motor driving the rear wheels. The PHEV model will be paired with a new downsized 1.5-liter 3-cylinder Ingenium petrol engine. Nearly every model will get a 48-volt mild hybrid system that cuts out at a standstill in urban driving, throttling fuel consumption and CO2 emissions. They say that the start-stop system works pretty well. It's supposed to be unveiled in the summer of 2019, available in the fall, and the Disco Sport looks like it will be around £31,000, which is just under the £32,000 of the Evoque in the UK. A long-term 2017 Land Rover Discovery was going a long-term test by Roadshow, which is a CNET magazine or online magazine, and I'll let you go out and check that out. So if you're in the market for a Disco 5, I think it's probably worth checking this one out. They had for a year a $65,000 American dollar Discovery Sport. All the things you would normally think. They really, really liked it. Of course, it had some problems. They don't like the infotainment system. The windshield washer jets froze up, which is the wrong time for them to freeze. They're not heated, and they were positioned in such a way that they froze. They did take it in for, it said it carried a lot of stuff, a lot of equipment. Since CNET, or excuse me, Roadshow tests other cars, they use the Disco as their crew car, gear car, and they said it carried a lot of their gear. They really liked it for that. They also did some trailering for a glamping trip and did pretty well, and they had the turbo diesel in it. They did take it in for standard maintenance, tire rotation, wheel alignment, and oil change. The tire rotation cost $40. The alignment was $200, but the oil change was $225 for the oil change. Like, okay, yeah.
I think they misunderstood that some other stuff was included there. Like, it was probably their first full fluid change. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, then.
And some of those fluid changes now involve dropping the pan, too. It's not as simple as just undoing the plug and letting it pee out.
Exactly.
Probably partly Land Rover's fault for not saying full fluid change or something. These guys know cars, so they would know.
It still beats the $4,000 oil change in a Ferrari.
I'd say if you're in the market for a brand new Disco 5, it's worth checking out. This article, they spent almost 14,000 miles driving it. They averaged 19.5 miles per gallon, which they said is a mile and a half over the EPA estimate for combined economy. And they said that's not shabby considering how many hours we left the thing idling. Translates to a little over 716 gallons of gas consumed at an average of $3 per gallon. So they shelled out almost $2,000 in gas. They like it. That was the bottom line. They kind of liked it.
Yeah, that was a good little summary they did.
Land Rover Canada celebrated 70 years of Land Rover with an on-road convoy. So they Land Rover Canada got together actual Land Rover owners of all stripes and sizes and makes and models, and just had a pleasant drive from Mississauga to Niagara-on-the-Lake. Did I say that right, Harold? Is it Mississauga?
Yes, Mr. Sauga'S wife.
Mr. Sauga'S wife. We may have a show title, Mr. Sauga'S wife. So this culminates, I don't know if it culminates, but it adds into the 2018 year celebration for Land Rover. You may recall, and this article summarizes this, which is good for us here. And in January, they announced one of only 3 demonstration vehicles that got the Series 1 ball rolling would be restored. February, Simon Beck outlined a Defender stretching 250 miles in the French Alps. You guys remember that one? Had the Guinness World Record for the fastest run on 2 wheels at Goodwood's Hill Climb, and that's Range Rover Sport SVR. And the company launched the Defender Works V8. That was that special limited edition Defender. And then they had this 100.
And in December, Richard Hammond bought himself one as a Christmas gift.
Did he? I didn't see that. Oh, nice.
I posted it on your Facebook. I thought you saw that. He did a nice video, and this is how I celebrate Christmas. Happy Christmas to me.
So this 110 kilometer anniversary convoy took place, and it was all supposed to be on road and family friendly, so they weren't doing anything too terribly difficult. It was just
and it's not a very long distance either.
No, that's not. There's some Canada news, so there you go. Then over Atlantic British, Greg Fitzgerald rang in the new year in Death Valley. I'll let you go out and read the article because it's pretty cool to check out Death Valley and what he experienced there. But he was invited on a week-long trip to Death Valley with some California Land Rover friends in early December. So he had always wanted to check out Death Valley, so he did that. And
December is a good time of year to go.
The trip ended up being all series trucks. There were 5 originally planned, but 2 dropped out for mechanical reasons. The 3 that we ended up with were all long base station wagon series models. He rode with Randy Rose in his 57 Series 1 107-inch, extremely rare vehicle in North America. He had owned it for 32 years and done a full rebuild. Maurice and Katie and their kids joined in their beautiful green 1960 Series 2 109 station wagon, and Paul von Klostdoen took his very late 1971 Series 2A 109 Zambezi, I guess that's its name, right-hand drive import from Britain with a well-thought-out camping setup in the back. So those three took that trip, got some really nice photos.
A 60% survival rate for a bunch of old trucks in Death Valley is really pretty good, if you think about it.
If maybe I'm confused with something else. I thought they saw some snow, but maybe not.
Well, maybe in December. Yeah, I have no desire to go to Death Valley in the summer.
No, not at all.
You know, there's a reason why the signs say, "Welcome to Death Valley. Hike or die."
I think there's a reason that death is in the name.
Yeah, that might have something to do with it.
That could. I think that's your first indicator right there.
You Northerners, this is just a little warm. I mean,
of course, you never know.
I'd rather go there than north right now.
It could have been named by the Vikings, too, to keep people out. It might have been a paradise.
Then over at the Western National Land Rover Rally, Four Wheeler magazine sent the Range Rover, and they crashed the party. They had taken, looks like they had a modified Defender and took it over there. But the Western National Land Rover Rally venue was unique. The trails were a blast, and believe it or not, the Land Rover freaks we met were actually very down to earth, even normal. Actually, they might have been a little too normal. Over the course of 3 days, we hit 3 trails, checked out a bunch of Rovers, and also spectated some good old-fashioned Land Rover human-based competitions reminiscent of our favorite past events, the Camel Trophy. So they see some photos and a little bit of video there of them taking their Defender to the Western National Land Rover Rally. And finally, in the news, our friend Graham Aldis has a YouTube channel, and he posted on December 17th, Oxford to Red Wharf Bay. On June 23rd, 2018, nearly 400 Land Rovers lined up on the beach at Red Wharf Bay, Anglesey, to recreate the legendary Drawing in the Sand, a first sketch by Maurice and Spencer Wilkes of their proposed 4x4. This was organized by the Land Rover Series 1 Club to celebrate the 70th anniversary of Land Rover. And among that was SNX 891, we know as Oxford. So he has a 7-minute, 35-second video you can check out. You probably saw the pictures, and we talked about it, of the outline of the trucks in the sand at Red Wharf Bay. Oxford was one of them, and now you can see it from the land-based and Oxford's view of that roundup.
From within the line.
And it has 407 views as we read this and record, and 7 likes. So hopefully we can bump that up. You'll have a link in the show notes.
Hopefully it actually is likable.
Yeah, I'd say so. Absolutely.
I would think. Yes. But wow, only 7 people liked it? Come on, people.
That's laziness. People watch a video and they go, that was nice. Why exercise my finger?
And I remind you that Graham has a video called After Overland. It is available to stream off of Vimeo, and there's a link there. You can do that and check that out if you want to get the full video story as we've retold, but you can get the full video story as kind of a companion piece to the podcast on the restoration of SNX 891.
And, of course, if you really don't understand all the significance of this, you can also get Graham's other video of the first Overland and understand where the Oxford truck even came from.
Indeed. I think it's still only available on DVD, but so the more people buy on the streaming, I think that'll encourage him to get his other titles out on streaming.
That could be. But get the DVD, because you're going to want to watch it over and over.
And I would like to say a big thank you to everybody that I saw at this year, or this past year now, at British Invasion in Stowe, Vermont, and then also at the Vermont Overland Birdwatching Safari, formerly Vermont Overland Rally. It was great to see everybody out there, get to talk to you all. I had obviously hoped to do summaries of those shows. We'll probably I'll dig up some photos and write up some notes, and we'll go over them sometime in the future. But I just wanted to say a big thank you, because I had a great time at both of those events, and there are so many great people there. So thanks, and I'll see you there the next time.
And you
bird watching, huh?
Yeah.
It's now a bird watching safari.
Is it hosted by the Vermont Ornithological Union?
It's not. No, still Vermont Overland. But yeah, I have a feeling that people misunderstood the name Rally and we're expecting people to be just tearing up all the dirt roads as fast as they could.
Yeah, not that kind of rally.
No, exactly.
So if it's going to be a bird watching event, we need to, when Oxford truck makes it over here, we need to make sure that it goes up there because it's a bird watching truck.
That's true. Oh, that would be great.
And Grizzly Torque for that matter.
And you also drummed up a new listener for us, so thanks very much.
Oh yeah, definitely. When I remember to carry cards in my pocket, they may or may not, usually may, show up under windshield wipers with notes to especially unique Land Rover owners. I think that particular one you're mentioning was a Series 2 with a pickup truck. It was a Series 2 88 with a pickup cab, I think.
I believe so.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Very nice truck.
And I will be up at Maine Winter Romp again this year with the Defender. That takes place February 15th, I think, through the 19th. I'll plan to show up on Friday and head out on Sunday. And then if all goes well, I'll head into Quebec, visit my buddy Mo again. And I've already been in touch with a couple Quebec Land Rover owners because I was checking on crossing the border with a right-hand drive truck, and they have not experienced any issues, so I feel confident it'll be fine. But I also said, hey, maybe we get together for a beer while I'm in Quebec. So if you're going to be at the Maine Winter Romp, say hi. I will have T-shirts with me and stickers. So if you want to help support the podcast, pick up a shirt.
So is that just a Quebec thing about the right-hand drive trucks, or is that all of Canada?
No, it's just like the U.S. as far except that they have a 15-year rule and.
Well, I
trucks.
understand that, but
it's
I'm
no
trying to
different
figure
than
out
here.
what the problem would be coming into the country.
There actually isn't a problem. I was just if you check their website, Canada site, it says that you can't bring in a vehicle that is right-hand drive. That is banned, but that's no different than here, where it's banned unless it's because that's just not.
That's in terms of importation.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Oh, gotcha.
So
it's all of Canada, not just Quebec, then, huh?
Yes, right.
Okay.
Right. But I think they specifically put in the wording in there that right-hand drive is banned. But that's I suspect that may be in our language in the U.S. too, but it's under like a safety thing,
Well, right-hand drive does not meet NHTSA regs, the
right.
FMVSS.
So I think that's the same. It's effectively the same thing.
Okay.
Same way to look at it. It's just that.
So the 15-year rule would apply in Canada, then, is what you're saying.
And the visiting rule also.
Yeah. Okay.
So in that case, I'm a visiting vehicle in addition to being over. Mainly a visiting vehicle. Yeah, I'm mainly a visiting vehicle at this point. As long as I'm not there for, I think you have like 6 months or something, just like the U.S. is.
So back to Winter Romp. Are you going to be taking the Defender out on the trails?
I do not plan to at this point.
I didn't expect you to.
Yes.
It's a very nice truck.
Yeah,
those trails can be brutal.
Yeah, there's the paying. There's the
first.
paying and not causing any other further difficulties.
Yeah, I have enough to do. I don't need to be fixing that right now. So
Yeah,
don't take it out on the trail and break it.
No. There's a couple little things that still need to be worked out, so this is considered part of its shakedown.
Perfect.
But there's always nice people that you can jump in their vehicle with and ride around.
Well, that'll be a fun time.
Definitely.
That is the news for January 2019. Commonwealth Classics is a direct importer of classic cars and trucks from Europe and South America. They're a registered Virginia dealership with a physical showroom just 45 minutes west of Washington, D.C. They specialize in importing and restoring different makes, models, and variants of vehicles not originally sold in the United States. Their vehicles are imported, titled, and available for you to test drive before you buy. For the Land Rover enthusiast looking for two-door Range Rover Classics, TDI-powered Discoveries, or beautifully restored Defenders, their showroom in Marshall, Virginia is a unique destination. Looking for something special? They can help source, restore, and import that special truck you've been looking for. Contact Commonwealth Classics for your next classic vehicle. Commonwealth Classics. Visit www.cwclassics.com. And now on the Centresteer podcast, joining us all the way from the UAE is Sam Watson. Welcome, Sam.
Hi, John. Good to be here.
Absolutely. I've been trying to get you on the show for a long, long time. You were one of the very first Twitter followers that I interacted with. Thanks for enjoying the show, supporting the show, and now finally coming on the show. Very excited.
It's very good of you to have me. I enjoy what you share on Twitter, and I enjoy listening to the podcast as well.
That's very kind. And so you are, I guess, of the biggest note to our listeners is you write for several Land Rover-related publications, including the LRO, Land Rover Owners International, which is probably the best known. I actually went to the LRO show back in 2015, so I should have made if you probably weren't there, but should have tried to make the connection at that time, but I didn't.
That was the infamous lost episode.
It was. I was in a pub near Milton Keynes and
say no more.
Exactly. Okay, you're right. You're right. So, how did you become a writer for Land Rover Owners International?
Well, I suppose if you ask somebody that question, it'll always be a fairly long story, but
we got time. It's the podcast.
Yeah, we specialize in long stories here.
I've been writing about outdoor pursuits, outdoor travel-related stuff in a number of magazines for years, and I was writing for some smaller 4x4 magazines in the UK, and John Pearson came across something I'd written about travel through the Sahara, John Pearson being the editor of LRO at the time, and pinged me an email and said, will you come and write for us? Will you write a regular column for us and some travel-related pieces for us? And of course, I said yes. And that was, I suppose, the thick end of 10 years ago now.
It's very cool. I know Land Rover Owner International is probably one of the premier publications. I know it's always prized to get over here. I think it costs about £5 million to get it over to the U.S., though.
Yeah, it's hard to find it in the U.S., unfortunately. I think it's available on the East Coast and in some places over on the West Coast. But I was over in the States 2 summers ago, and it was hard to pin it down.
Well, it used to be pretty easy because we used to have these places called bookstores.
Yeah. I've heard about them. Yeah.
I've been to one or two. Yeah, they used to carry it some places, but it was still always very expensive. But it's it's a great publication, and our local club, there'd always be one guy who would buy it, and then we get the magazines and we go through them when we get together. And it's like, oh, look at this. So it's tough to read though when you're in that situation, but it was fun to go through the magazine. I think it's
that was our monthly club meeting. One guy would read the mag, and the rest of them would watch Rover porn videos.
Sounds like the UK.
And then the bell would ring, and the next guy would get it.
That's right.
Yeah.
I do think it's available online. There's an app, an LRO app. But it's tough for me. I find it tough to read, on your phone. For some reason, it's not the same experience.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
So, how did you become a Land Rover person? And because I know you own several trucks, we'll get to those. But I want to know how you got into. How did you start bleeding green?
I was brought up in the rural north of England, where every second car was a farmer's Defender, and we had a lot of military bases. Air Force and Army around us, and again, every second vehicle there was a Defender, and they were just part of the furniture, really. And over time, I kind of got into traveling around using them, having been weaned on TV shows like Daktari and Born Free and that sort of thing. And I suppose I was one of those kids that always fancied traveling around Africa in a Land Rover, really, and then it grew from there. And so I was lucky enough to be able to do that.
Did you know of the first Overland when you were young?
Sorry, I lost you there.
Were you aware of First Overland when you were a kid? Did that get into your blood too?
First Overland, no. I didn't know about First Overland until much later, but there were similar travels happening around about the sort of 70s when I was a child, and the 80s. People were traveling around in Land Rovers. There was or there still is a well-known UK TV celebrity, predominantly concerned with nature documentaries, David Attenborough. And whenever he was on the BBC, there was always a Land Rover in the background somewhere, covered in mud. It was always part of the furniture in the UK.
That's Sir David Attenborough to you.
It absolutely is Sir David Attenborough. Yeah, you're quite right.
And actually, that's a First Overland connection, because he gave them, as you know, he gave them video or film to take.
Absolutely. And he wrote the foreword in the book too, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yes, and I just listened to the audio version of First Overland, and he read the introduction. It's you can hear David Attenborough. It's pretty cool.
I'll have to hear that. I've not heard the audio version. That sounds fantastic.
It actually is. It is very well done. Tim Slessor reads it, and you can hear Tim's voice. You get to hear Sir David Attenborough read the foreword. It's a good read, good listen. I highly recommend listening to it. It was very well done. I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. I'll chase that up.
Yeah,
I was quite lucky actually, because the first overland truck that they've recovered, Oxford, was restored by the guy in Yorkshire who works on my Defenders back home, and so I got to spend some time with it, which was quite memorable last year.
Yeah, Adam Bennett.
That's right. Yeah,
he's been on the show.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So I gather. Yeah,
for a quick little interview that spanned 2 episodes.
He can talk.
If you've ever met Adam, you know why I say that.
I do. Yeah.
He can definitely talk. Yes. So Adam works small world, huh? Land Rover world. Adam works on your Defender.
No, Adam asked a guy. Adam's from York in northern England, and he asked one of the leading independent Land Rover specialists in the UK, who coincidentally is also based in York, a guy called Ben Stowe. He asked him to rebuild and restore Oxford when Oxford was brought back from the island, and so Ben put Oxford back together, and I got together with both of them probably about a year ago now, and had a chat.
So tell us about the very first Land Rover you purchased or bought that was your own.
Well, I'd always wanted one since I was a kid and as a teenager, and I trained as a science teacher in the UK, and so my first sort of teaching job was at a small rural school in York, and I ended up teaching some evening classes as well, and with that I managed to save up some cash for an ex-military Defender, which was a 110 hard top, normally and very low mileage, ex-Royal Artillery. It had served in the Kosovo conflict, and it had about 40,000 miles on it. It was winterized, and yeah, very, very nice truck, and that was in 2000. And I'd borrowed vehicles before that, but never actually owned one. And took it to Morocco that summer as a kind of proving trip. And the car did extremely well. Normally aspirated engine, not the most powerful, but certainly reliable, and a lot of low end torque. And it coped with the sand dunes and the Sahara and the Atlas Mountains very happily. And that's the vehicle I still use as my main overland truck, but I'm in the process of stretching it to a 130 now. It's gone through a 200 TDI, which is perfectly good, but I'm going to put a 300 in it. And it's still slogging away. It's a super thing.
So you took a winterized Land Rover to the desert.
In summer. Yes.
That's
exactly.
not as dumb as you might sound, because the insulation they put in to keep the winter out also keeps the extreme summer out too.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it had large copper heaters in the back, radiators in the back, which took the engine water and circulated it through these copper radiators. And I couldn't turn the bloody things off, and so this thing was radiating heat all the way through the Sahara. But it
that might be less than
wasn't as well. I mean, the beer was warm, which was one thing, but yeah, it wasn't perfect. Yeah, but the rest of the car was very good. Very pleased with it.
What did you name that truck?
Well, that's Elsa, because as a kid, I was sort of wowed by the story of Born Free and George and Joy Adamson in Kenya, inevitably Land Rover connection there. And I got involved with the Born Free Foundation, which is a UK-based wildlife conservation and wilderness conservation organization back in the 90s. And so to name the truck after Elsa the Lioness seemed a logical thing to do. And So yeah, that's Elsa, and she's currently sitting at home in the UK waiting for a new chassis.
Yeah, the pictures on your website, it looks well kitted out. What did you do anything else to it in addition to it being just a winterized Land Rover? What kind of kit did you add to it?
To be honest, I took most of the winterizing stuff off over time, and it has had for probably about 15 years. It's had a 200 TDI, a Discovery 200 TDI, so the footwells needed to be adapted to route the exhausts through. Big intercooler, Discovery transfer box to raise the gearing for highway cruising, the usual sort of overland stuff of fridge, roof tent, snorkel, winch, that sort of thing. But I mean, no Land Rover is ever finished, is it? No Land Rover is ever, especially a project expedition vehicle, is never finished, and so it's always a work in progress. But I suppose the biggest piece of work that it's had done on it for a while is happening now with the chassis stretch, and I'm going to try and add an extra row of doors, but keep the 110 hard top at the back, which makes it a bit more, in some ways, a bit more practical. But of course, it's another 2 feet longer.
What's your plan to then for the stretch one? Is it going to be like a camper? Is that the plan?
Yeah, it's going to be what it is now. It's going to be an overland truck for long distance, remote area travel, wilderness travel, desert travel, that sort of thing. Self-supporting as much as possible. I mean, it's currently got 3 water tanks and 3 fuel tanks in it, and I'll keep that configuration and probably put a rear winch on it as well as a front winch. But the idea being that in the past, when I traveled with my girlfriend, she said, "Oh, what happens if we pick up a hitchhiker? What happens if we pick up friends? We take friends. We can't carry any more than 2 people in this, really, because there's only the 2 front seats, and the rest is all hard top, and in the back there's safari equipment. So there's a kind of rationale to add an extra row of seats to make it a bit more people friendly. But it'll carry on doing the same thing it's doing, which is traveling across the desert, traveling across Europe and Africa and bits of Asia. The plan eventually is to do UK to Cape Town, which I've been talking about for a long time and never got around to doing. So that's eventually the plan with it.
Well, if you get on with that plan, you can convoy with the bells.
Well, I've been talking to Graham on and off for a while. Yeah, we're going to sink a few beers, I think, when we finally do meet up.
that's where they're headed mighty soon.
Yes. Well, I'm hoping to be down in Southwest Africa when Graham's down there, but not with Elsa, with another truck I've bought. But yeah, that's a plan we're kicking around at the moment. Yeah.
Well, what's the estimated time till your truck till Elsa's ready? Is it in the planning stages?
Yeah, it is. There's a one donor vehicle has been bought because in the UK, if you want to register a chassis stretched vehicle, there's various legal hoops you've got to jump through to make it all compliant with, as you'd expect, with government regulations. And so I'm going to do various sort of jumping through bureaucratic hoops to make it all street legal. But there's a 130 donor vehicle that's been bought and is waiting in one garage, and Elsa's waiting in another garage. The trouble is, living abroad or living in Arabia, I'm not there to pursue the project as much as I'd like, but going to be heading back home in a couple of months' time to put the 2 vehicles together and start unbolting things, really. So I suppose at the moment it's a case of there's a pile of parts evolving to go onto the project, and what will emerge from it is a 130 hardtop overlander and a 110 soft top for trundling around the moors of northern England in the summer, I suppose.
Sweet. So I have to ask, why not just use the 130? Why stretch the 110?
Because it's purely sentimental, really. I couldn't.
Fair.
I wouldn't want to take another vehicle around as my main overland truck. I've done so many miles with Elsa. She's been through so many different things that it would seem churlish and disloyal to retire her now. And so I thought, well, stretch her to a 130 and move on to the next phase in her life.
That's the perfect answer. You win the internet for the day. Yes.
Of course, I'm not sure if that's really like stretching Elsa or just taking Elsa's skin off and putting it on somebody else's skeleton.
Well, you're right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and I mean, there is an analogy. I suppose it's like grandfather's axe, isn't it? And it's had 3 new handles and 2 new heads, and so is it still the same axe? I don't know. But yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Mind you, that's part of what Land Rovering is about, but still.
It is, yeah. Nobody said rationality has to be part of this.
Right. But it does acquire a new identity because the V5 goes with the chassis, does it not?
It does, but you can apply to change the number plate. And so what I'd do is it would take on the license plate of the 130, and then I'd go through the correct legal channels to change it back to the original license plate. So eventually, she would look like Elsa again, but slightly longer. It's a bit circuitous, but if you want to do this thing right and keep the police happy, and of course you have to, then you've got to go about it a certain way.
Yeah, that works great until you try to import it into our country here. Then it gets tricky in a hurry.
Yes, I can well imagine.
Well, he's approaching.
I have wondered about bringing her over. Actually, to tour the US. Yeah.
You talk about the legal hurdles you have to go through there, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, you ain't seen nothing, dude.
Yeah, I came across to try and do a coast to coast with a friend from the State Department 2 years ago, who was importing his 110 from. Well, it was one we'd rebuilt with him in Cairo, and then he'd done a tour in Cambodia, and he was shipping it in from Cambodia, and there was a great, as you can imagine, a great pile of paperwork to wade through with that one. So yeah.
Although as a foreign national who's just passing through this country, it's not that much of a challenge compared to like somebody like an American citizen trying to bring it in and keep it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
if you're a visiting vehicle, like the issue is the owner of the vehicle has to stay with the vehicle. If the owner leaves the country, you can stay for like 6 months. I think the vehicle can stay for 6 months in the country and it doesn't have to be more than 25 years old.
Right.
But if the owner leaves the country, the truck has to go. So the owner always has to be with the vehicle, which is the question and the problem with getting Oxford here to the U.S. is, Adam Bennett is the owner of the vehicle, and if he were to, he would have to come with the vehicle, and that could be an issue because it doesn't seem like I don't know that Adam travels by air.
I was going to say he can. I mean, in case in point, he drove it all the way to Italy for a show, tossed the guy the keys, and jumped a plane home. So I mean, it's been known to do, but he can't do that here because when he leaves the country, we're screwed.
Yeah. Is he talking about bringing it to the States?
There has been discussion of it visiting all the continents on the planet.
We are attempting to conspire for such a thing.
Yeah, there was a group of us about 2 years ago. We mooted the idea of taking a group of Series 1s over the Rubicon, and that idea has never completely died. So maybe we should give Adam a shout about that.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
That actually is an interesting idea. Yeah,
I don't think anybody's done that, have they?
I don't believe so. I think just because of the name, it seems to be an exclusive Jeep thing, and you don't hear of too many Land Rovers doing the Rubicon, but I'm sure it's happened. But then again,
the thing is, if it did happen, the magazines would all report it as these funny Jeeps doing the trail.
Yes, quite.
And there's really not that many Series 1s about. And usually if there's a Series 1 in North America, typically it's used, but it's not going to be heavily off-roaded, typically. That's
sure.
The case. But.
No, but if you guys were going to do it, I'd build my Series 1 and consider joining you guys.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
We can get a crew together. That'd be
fantastic.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that's worth thinking about because, as I say, the plan has never completely died. There are four owners in the UK who were seriously considering bringing their vehicles over in containers, and a fifth friend who's Canadian but based in Cairo, and he was keen as well. So it's still trundling along on a back burner somewhere. So I'll keep you posted on that one. That might well be a good way forward. I've just bought one myself. I've just bought a 107, so that could be maybe that's a bit long for the Rubicon, but it certainly could be part of the mix.
It could be a support vehicle.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, carry the beer.
Indeed.
Well, there you go.
I actually have the beer carrying vehicle.
said a voice with satisfaction.
Oh, absolutely.
Actually, when we built his 110, there were many discussions about beer capacity. So yes.
And it has transported I'm very proud of this. It has transported 1,000 pounds of beer.
Really? Wow. Pounds weight, obviously, right. Wow.
Yes.
Fantastic.
It's
what was the story with that?
We were going to an event, and I used the 110 to transport six half barrels to the event.
Well, I came across for Muddy Chef, I think it was in 2016.
Yeah.
I was wowed by the number of craft beers that I ran across in New England and up and down the East Coast. So, yeah, I'm very keen to come back and discover some more.
Well, come to Western Pennsylvania. You're now a friend of the show, and we'll show you around.
Oh, bless you. I'll do that, sir.
John has, I think, all of the microbrews already as hotspots in his GPS. So,
of course. What style do you like? Which are you IPA, lager, ale?
Ale, IPA. Yeah, more
Stouts.
sort of dark.
Okay.
Old school ale. Yeah, but certainly a lot of the stateside IPAs I've tried and been really quite strongly impressed by. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll show you all the best ones.
Oh, fantastic! I look forward to that.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So Elsa is your main truck, I guess, and you've had that the longest. And it looks like you have what looks like, at least according to your website, as I'm using for reference, doing some research, you have a 2001 Discovery TDI called Tusker.
Yeah, that's right. A D2 that was a police V8, a highway patrol police V8.
Ooh, that's cool. You get all the cool.
Was re-engined. Yeah. Sorry, say again.
You get all the cool vehicles.
I'm lucky.
Yeah, I'm just picturing a disco as a pursuit vehicle.
Yeah.
That's an interesting notion.
It wasn't pursuit per se. It was there's a stretch of motorway goes over the Pennines in northern England, which goes quite high up. I mean, not high by continental US standards, but certainly high by English standards. It goes up into where there's regularly snow and ice in the winter. It gets blocked, and we have all sorts of issues with fairly grotty weather. And so the police up there tend to use fairly serious 4x4s to recover big 18-wheelers and trucks that have all sorts of issues. And so this Discovery was one of those for a couple of years. Yeah.
So not about going fast, but about doing important things.
Yeah, exactly. Unblocking the motorways when they're congested with jackknife trucks or recovering wrecks and that sort of thing, because visibility up there drops very quickly and weather conditions change very fast, and so they need fairly robust 4x4s to pull problems out of the way.
See, I always thought from watching all the British TV shows and police dramas and such that it was when you saw a Discovery or maybe a Range Rover in police livery, it was always the chief superintendent. It was always some leadership guy showing up. You got the nice car. Didn't get
the boss always gets first pick on the stuff, and if the option is a Maestro, I think I'd pick the Disco too.
Yeah. I suppose for years, certainly in the 70s and 80s, the if you like, the sheepdog car on the UK motorways was always a Range Rover Classic or latterly a Discovery. It was the one that was sort of keeping an eye on the flow of pulling idiots out of the way and pulling problems out of the way.
Here we now have the police cars are now all SUVs. They're not doing sedans anymore. So there's a lot of Dodge. Was it Dodge? Not Durangos. What are they? Dodge Rams or something? And then Ford Broncos everywhere.
That's changing actually now. The Dodge Charger has become the police car of choice.
Oh, there is.
Yes, I got pulled over by a Charger in where was it? Possibly
New York?
Maine. Yes, it was Maine. It was Maine because I was driving a 2.25 engined 110 very slowly, and I was hanging onto the hard shoulder, and I had two wheels over the side of the road because I was trying not to present an obstruction to other cars. and a charger came up behind me with the lights on and pulled me over. And he thought I was drunk because I was half on the road and half off. So yeah.
That's the only time a Land Rover ever gets pulled over.
For going too slow, presenting an obstruction.
So what is Tusker's status?
Oh, Tusker's just come back from Morocco. I drove her down to Morocco about 6 weeks ago, and she is TDI. All the Disco 2 electrics have been taken out and replaced with Disco 1 electric. So basically, it's a Disco 1 with an extra foot of space in the rear.
So it's about 200 pounds lighter than it was before.
Oh yeah. I mean, it runs extremely well, and the fuel pump's been tweaked. And
that's what I call a copper diet.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with it. With it being an old school Disco, it's still got an awful lot of room taken up by the engine and an awful lot of room taken up by the passenger compartment, and not much for cargo space. But it still runs very well. Yeah.
I'm kind of envious of this one. You have a Camel Trophy Edition Discovery 1 called Bumblebee.
Yeah, it's a strange model to have because it's not a real Camel Trophy. It's not an event Camel Trophy vehicle. I had one, a TDI from the '97 event back in the UK, but it had the curse of the Disco 1, especially in northwestern Europe, and the back rusted like hell. And so I had to sell it on for restoration. But when I came out here to Arabia, it turns out that for the Arabian, or for the Gulf market, and also they did the same for the Japanese market, special vehicles back at Land Rover built a limited run. I think it was only 150 of what they call Camel Trophy Edition, which is the Sandglow paint and the steel wheels and various other cosmetic things, a Mantek snorkel, which is obviously not cosmetic, but it looks like Camel Trophy. And they sold them as Camel Trophy Edition. So it's a bit of a cheat, really. It's not. It's Camel Trophy Light, if you like. But yeah, it's a factory Camel. So I'm pleased with it. It's a 3.9 V8 automatic, and it's got a heavy roof rack and draw system in the back. So it struggles to break 10 miles per gallon, which is not ideal for an overland vehicle. But I'm pleased with it. It's a nice truck.
That's about what we get out of any Disco here.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, yeah.
You don't buy the Disco for its fuel mileage.
No, you're right. No, you don't. It's a bit of a drawback here because I tend to take it into the desert. By its nature, there aren't many fuel stops out there, so you've got to take quite a few jerry cans with you. But I'd rather it was diesel from that point of view. But it certainly makes a nice noise.
What do you use Bumblebee for?
It lives here where I am at the moment in the UAE, and it's predominantly for desert travel, for Middle Eastern overlanding. I just came back from the Sultanate of Oman with it. It's kitted up with the roof tent and fridge and the bits and pieces you'd expect. And it was kind of restored by the previous owner. Still a few mechanical things on it I want to get back to spec, but I'm pleased with it. It's a good truck. It does well. It's reliable.
You bought that while you were there?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I bought it from
Find it on Dubizzle?
No, I as you'd imagine, wherever you go, if you're a Land Rover guy, you'll find the Land Rover mafia waiting. And I fell in with a group of guys who had Land Rovers, one of whom was a Brit who was leaving, and he needed to move on his collection of four Land Rovers, 2 Discoveries, 2 Range Rovers. And the Camel was kitted up with tents, fridge, various other bits and pieces. It was his go-to overland truck. So
there you go.
So I said, yeah, that'll do very well. And so it was a straight deal.
Move right in.
For sure, yeah.
It looks like you currently only have 3 trucks. Is there anything else that you haven't put on your website that you use?
There's the 130 donor vehicle.
Right.
But I haven't put that on the website. And I've also bought a 107 in Zimbabwe, which is kind of a bit odd. But yeah, that's currently going through at the moment.
Tell us a little more about the 107.
Well, a couple of years ago, I crossed the Alps with my friend Ben in his 80-inch Series 1, and we drove up to a glacier in the Italian Alps and various other bits and pieces with this truck. And it was a fantastic fantastic experience. I'd never overlanded a Series 1 before, and he gave it some fairly hard country to cross. We went with a Series 2A. And the Series 2A had some cheap parts in the engine, and the Series 1 ended up towing the Series 2A up one of the Alps, which was quite good for the camera. And Series 1 prices, as you know, are going crazy all over the place. And I thought, well, I'd like one, but I'm not going to be able to afford one. And then a friend who was born and brought up in Rhodesia when it was Rhodesia, and still has some vehicles out there and lives out here in the Gulf now. He said to me, well, I'm selling my Series 1. Do you want? And he named a price that was too good to turn down. So I'm now the owner of a 107 pickup in Bulawayo in Zimbabwe, which seems like a good option to do some touring and some overlanding down in Central and Southwestern Africa next year. So that's the plan. So if you hear of somebody being eaten by lions in a broken down Land Rover in the middle of the African bush, it's probably going to be me.
They don't break down. What are you talking about?
I'm just hoping the mechanic in Bulawayo knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Usually they do. Now, when I brought in the 110 from the UK, and the battery was dead and had a flat tire. It's meaningless, but it had a dead battery, and the dock workers had no idea what to do. They picked it up with the crane, took it off the boat, stuck it on the side of the dock, and we didn't know this, of course, until later. But the transporter who picked up the truck conveniently was from Africa. I forget which country. Harold probably remembers.
Zimbabwe.
It was Zimbabwe, and
really,
yeah, his name was Mbezi. He knew exactly. He went right into the seat, jumped it, got the truck, got it onto the transporter, and brought it up to Pennsylvania. And yes, he knew exactly what to do. He was from Zimbabwe.
Fantastic. Land Rover Mafia again. There you go.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I know. I hear you. All this traveling and the Land Rovers you do, I guess it's all in service of writing your articles. Any trips that you think that people should take? Are there special places that come to mind immediately? Some highlights, something people should go see in an off-road, overland vehicle?
Yeah, it's difficult to pin down one particular one as more impressive or outstanding than the others, because wherever you go, you meet the kind of experiences and people that broaden your horizons and make you smile, and you add them to the great long list of friends, and so you think, oh, I'll never top that, and then something else comes along. But I would say Nepal, Kathmandu is an awesome destination from a Land Rover point of view. There is a company out there who hires out Defenders, just throws you the keys and a map and says you could go here, or you could go here, or you could go here, and within a day you can be in the Himalayas, and that's something that's been off the radar for many people. Many people will say, oh yes, Africa or the Silk Road or the Rubicon or South America, but the Himalayas hasn't really been on the Land Rover radar.
So they just toss you the keys of the map and say goodbye?
Pretty much. I mean, it's a car hire firm like any other, apart from the fact they hire out expedition kitted Defenders in Nepal. So yeah,
they are a very trusting lot.
They are, but they've got a good network of support facilities throughout the country, and I think they have I'm pretty sure they have a vetting process where they assess the person to whom they're hiring the vehicle, and if they're hiring it to somebody who's a bit green, then they won't give you the vehicle, gratis and say off you go. They'll probably send somebody with you, but certainly recently they have thrown a 110 to a German guy and said off you go, and he's done 15 days around the Himalayas and come back with a smile wide as the sky. So that's, to me, is the big revelation at the moment. The place I keep going back to is Nepal, because as you can imagine, it's a varied and a rich place to travel around in a Land Rover.
Harold, it is not the Western world. I suspect that lawyers and insurance companies are not primary drivers of society.
Okay.
Well, it's interesting. listening to First Overland, they actually go into Nepal, and there was, I think there was, if I remember correctly, there was no road at that time. There had been, I think, a road from World War II, but it got covered over, if I remember correctly. I'm trying to remember.
That was Burma, I think.
That Burma too.
The Stillwell.
Oh, the Stillwell Road.
The Stillwell Road, but I think there was another side, like a side road off of that, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. There was a lot of roads, and that they were trying to find, or not a lot, but a couple. But I think that they made their way, and they were a Series 1 traveling into Nepal, and they made their way in and made their way back, and so there you go. Yeah, Nepal. That's in a Land Rover. I think actually Land Rovers have been there that was one of the first motorized vehicles, I think, to get there.
Well, and that's that LR70 video from that little town on the top of the mountain there.
Yes.
We belong to the place that has the Land Rovers.
Yes. There are quite a lot out there. There's been a long association with the British Army, with the Gurkha regiments, and so a lot of the Gurkha regiments leave vehicles out there, and have done for 60 years, and so there's a lot of Land Rovers around. Yeah, series trucks as well.
Do you believe the often quoted stat that 70% of the world's 70% of the world, their first vehicle they saw was a Land Rover?
That's a statistic and a quote that's been around for, I guess, 20 years. And I'm sure it has been true at some point. Whether it still is, I don't know. I mean, the world is becoming smaller. Globalization is becoming more of a thing, and tarmac and neon on concrete are spreading. I would like to think if it's not true, then it's still not far away from true, but I doubt it these days.
I think I agree with you. It probably was true at one point, but probably in the last 20, 30 years, it's been eclipsed by all the other vehicles, Toyotas and such.
Until the last 10 years, if you drove from Europe to Cape Town down the East Coast route through Egypt and Sudan, Kenya, Tanzania, that sort of thing, you needed a 4x4. But certainly in the last 5 years, if not the last 10 years, it is now entirely tarmac if you want it to be. And so you can do it in an ordinary road-going sedan or a subcompact that you might find on the street, and people have done. And that I think is reflected in most continents now. What was once the bush and a sort of road that's hard to, or barely a road, is now tarmac, is now mapped, is now covered in fast food outlets.
It kind of takes all the sport out of it.
Well, it does. You're right. Yes, it does. And the world is getting smaller and more uniform, unfortunately.
See the wonderful dark continent of Africa in a blue frickin' Prius.
Well, people do. I'm afraid you're right. Yeah. I mean, you can still find the places that are tucked away. You can still find the places that are on the unbeaten track, but it becomes harder every year.
So we now arrive to, how do you know Malcolm Nance, friend of the show?
Yeah, Malcolm.
He was on a couple episodes back in 2018.
That's right. Yeah, I remember. Malcolm and I first met up in Cairo about 5 years ago. He pinged me a message, I think, saying, you've got Land Rovers, I've got Land Rovers, I'm in Cairo, you're in Cairo, do you fancy a beer? And so we met up and had a beer and had a chat, and things sort of spiraled from there. Obviously, Malcolm has interests in spheres other than Land Rover, and he's a very busy man right now.
We've been told that.
Yeah, and he's fighting the good fight, but he's still got his fleet of Land Rovers, and he's still got several over here in Arabia, actually. So yeah,
we're working on that.
I'm sure you are. Yeah, I keep meaning to go and drive that 6x6 of his before he takes it to the States.
I was just kind of curious what the connection was, because when I talked to Malcolm, before he got him on the show, he said, "You need to talk to Sam Watson." Like, okay, it's finally another angle to get you on the show.
That topic comes up every time I talk to him as well.
Well, I owe him at least one beer.
Indeed. So you have trucks in 3 continents. Is it right? You got Asia,
yes,
Africa,
so, yeah.
and they're in service of writing articles. I take it. Why are you in Cairo? Not Cairo. You're in the UAE now. Why are you in UAE? And is that just because you base yourself there for a period of time and do some adventures and then move on to somewhere else?
Yeah, my day job is as a deputy principal in a school, and that's what keeps the wolf from the door in the real world. And so training as a teacher has given me a chance to sort of pretty much live and work wherever there are schools. So for 10 years I was in Cairo, and then because of ISIS activity, they closed off the desert in Egypt about 3 years ago now. And so I relocated to about an hour out of Dubai, where the Arabian desert is equally interesting. And so this is it for the next couple of years, I think. And then I don't know after that, but I'm lucky enough to be able to travel around with a Land Rover and use it as a platform to see different places, meet different people, which is a bit, in many ways, it's not very real world. It's not very, I suppose, responsible and grown up, all these things they say we've got to be. But it does for now.
Yeah, hey, seems as good enough as any to me. I don't know. So you teach geography?
I have done. I mainly teach the sciences.
Okay. What is ICT?
Information Communication Technology, computers, basically.
Okay.
Why do you ask?
It just says you're a teacher of geography, ICT, and the sciences. That's all.
Oh, I see. Yes. Yeah.
Somebody's been scouring your resume and is now quizzing you about it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's interesting that there's a little bit of technology in there because as we find here, especially in the U.S., a lot of Land Rover enthusiasts are in IT in some capacity. So I can now...
Or they're recovering from a career in IT.
So many guys in the UK would say so they choose a car that has no computers in it whatsoever.
Damn straight.
Yeah.
There's something to be said.
No control, alt delete.
What's your next trip, Sam?
Georgia. That's the East European Republic, not the US state. In 2 weeks' time, I'm meeting up with a guy with 2 Range Rovers in Tbilisi, and we're going into the mountains, which should be interesting because I always kind of thought that the Land Rover world was in countries of the Commonwealth or countries that had been in one way or another associated with the UK, but this is proving not to be the case, and there are flourishing Land Rover clubs in Asia, in former Soviet republics, in the Far East, all over the place. Every time I go somewhere, there turns out to be a few guys with Land Rovers that go off and do crazy things. And so I'm meeting up with a guy called Alex and his friends, and we're heading off into the mountains in Range Rovers, which should be interesting.
I think you'd be hard-pressed to go anywhere on the planet and not be within a couple hours of another Land Rover person.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right, yeah. And they're all cut from the same cloth, as I'm sure you know. They've all got the same crazy sense of humor, and they've got the same attitude about the life, about the world and about life, I think.
Although I will say some of the craziest off-road videos I've seen seem to come out of Russia or some related country.
Yes.
Well, that's because the craziest on-road driving happens in Russia, too.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, YouTube's got a lot to answer for, but yeah.
I think you pretty much have to have a dash cam on anything you drive there.
Yes, yeah.
Because you need proof of what somebody's just done to you.
Yeah. What happened with the 18-wheeler and the 20 tons of logs, or the flash in the sky, or whatever. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, mind-boggling.
Or there was that, I don't think this was in Russia, but there was a guy on a motorcycle and a car comes up behind him and he flips up onto the roof. I don't even know if that was real, but it looked cool. It was not from a dash cam.
Spectacular.
So you're going to Georgia in Range Rovers. What style or what vintage?
Well, one's a Mark III and one's a classic. And beyond that, I think some of the guys have got discoveries, but I haven't spoken to them yet. But the guy that's hosting me has a classic. Is it L? I can't remember. Is it L322?
Yeah.
Series 3? Yeah. So that should be interesting. Just as the weather starts to get a bit wintry and autumnal, so should be good.
Perfect. Well, time for taking. You should get Elsa back, and it's a winterized version.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I found Land Rovers to love snow. It just seems like they go together. Snow, cold weather, and Land Rovers just seem made for each other.
I agree with you.
Been my experience.
Yeah. Find the right tires and you just go all day. Yeah.
Range Rover Classic, those were always very cool. I always like that style of vehicle. Just looks good.
It does, and a bit like driving an armchair. But you arrive at the end of your 6-hour drive in a Range Rover far more composed than you do. So yeah, I know what you mean.
Than 2 hours in a series truck.
Well, yes, yeah, exactly, yeah. You lose all the fillings in your teeth, or all your teeth. Yeah, yeah. That's going to be a new experience for this 107 in Zimbabwe, overlanding at 40 miles an hour. But yeah, it should be good.
A lot of serious off-roading. You're not going that fast anyway. So whether you're in a
exactly
coil or you're in a leaf spring,
exactly.
Well, I think compounding the problem with the Series 1, it's not just the suspension being rough. It's those god awful Series 1 seats.
Yes, yeah. Designed for a different time, weren't they? Yeah. And people 6 inches shorter, I think. Yeah, you're right. Driving the 80 through up to the Alps a couple of years ago, I found out that my most comfortable position was actually with one leg sticking out over the sill where the door normally would be. So yeah, and I think
that's why they make the doors removable on those.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have back problems, you will after a day driving in a Series 1.
Exactly. Yeah. On hearing problems.
Well, what?
Yeah, quite.
Say again?
What do you make of the upcoming and the current model Land Rover line? It's definitely been a departure, I think, from the past of Land Rover's models. Care to comment on the current state of Land Rover vehicles? And, of course, that includes the upcoming new Defender. It's
a topic of conversation that has been current for about 10 years, hasn't it? And I think the director of Land Rover, I forget his name, under BMW ownership, said that the market for Land Rover now is not, and they are certainly compared to somebody like General Motors or Toyota, they are a very small company with a fraction of the output of GM or Toyota, and they have to tailor what they sell to what they think people will buy, and I think the niche they've gone for is obviously the sort of the more luxurious SUV, with the belief that they sell to a particular niche that isn't really addressed by the bigger manufacturers. And I think they some success with this. Of course, this leaves the enthusiasts baying for blood and saying, well, you've betrayed your roots, you've betrayed your origins, and that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, I sympathize with that viewpoint to an extent. Entirely, because all my Land Rovers are old school, but the company has to evolve and has to address the market that presents itself, and they're not big enough to produce a very small volume back to basics vehicle that some of us might want to see. And so I suppose I'm sitting on the fence and I've got a foot in either viewpoint, and I say, well, I see why they're doing it. I think it's a shame. There is still a hope, I think, that Defender will be modular and that you will be able to buy various spec versions for various markets. And once the enthusiast market gets hold of it, then that variety will multiply again, of course. But yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. They're changing from the way they used to be. And the spy shots of the new Defender that we've seen around the place suggest it will be complicated, expensive, extremely capable, but a different animal. Well, as different, the D5 is as different from the D1 as the new Defender will be from the old Defender, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's a long, complicated answer to your short question. I'm sorry.
No. Well, there is no short answer, and if you listen to our show, we talk about this a lot. So
yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
We've actually done the show at the right time in Land Rover history because it gives us infinite amount of content. So
yeah, because we're always looking for things to talk about on the show. We have trouble filling our 45 minutes that we plan for.
I think you're spot on that life has changed for Land Rover. It's moving. I've said this before. If Land Rover had the money, Defender would have progressed just as the other models progressed. And so
Yes.
instead of us the new Defender, instead of it being this revolution, it would have been an evolution over time.
Yes.
And so now
Absolutely.
we're at the point of, hey, we're at the revolution, and it's going to catch up. It's just the way things are. And
Yeah.
just like the Mustang has evolved, and the Corvette has evolved, and Toyota Land Cruiser has changed.
And the Wrangler.
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
That's probably the best example. Yeah, the Wrangler has definitely progressed, but has that same look and feel. But if you look at one from 20, 30 years ago compared to today, it's different, but there are still styling cues there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think
with the Discovery is that Govern, I think, gets away from that styling cue that I think keeps the current customers a little more involved, because it doesn't look exactly the same, and mentally that may to them say that it's not what they thought it was historically.
Yes. I've heard a lot of people say that. I've just come back from Sri Lanka and talking to the Land Rover community there, and they hate the D5 with a passion, and they say, "Oh, it doesn't look right. It doesn't look like a Land Rover. It's not the same." I see absolutely their point. Although I remember the sort of derogatory comments I made when I first saw a D3, having been used to the D1 and the D2, and I saw a D3, and there was again that sort of enormous step in styling away from what we were used to, and I said, "My God, it looks like a post office van." And then, it grows on you, or I find it. Maybe I'm too much of a loyalist, but I find it grows on me, and I have a feeling that D5 will go the same way. That in 2 years, 3 years' time, people will be happy with the look of the D5. But maybe I'm just being rose-tinted glasses. I don't know.
The irony of that story is that you say that the D3 looked like a post office van, and the post office had a pretty good fleet of D1s,
Right. Yeah, sure.
It's always a good conversation, as it gives us things to talk about. It's interesting. The D5 I find here in the U.S. looks a lot like other SUVs on the road, particularly the Dodge.
Yes,
I'm thinking particularly the Ford products.
From the front end, I think the the Explorer from the front, but I think the Dodge from the rear, and which is definitely changed on the D5. To me, doesn't look like a Land Rover at all. There's or Discovery, I should say. And we've said this number of times. When you have to call out in your marketing material the 2 millimeter rise in the rear of the disco for the bump up in the headliner, in the roof, that there's something wrong there. Like, there really is a bump up in the head. It's like 2 millimeters. Come on.
Yeah, if you have to prove it with a ruler or a micrometer, it's not there.
Yes, and I think that's why they're so fond of the offset license plate at the back, because that makes it, in their mind, distinctively different.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
But I take your point completely, and I agree with you about the extra. Sorry.
I'm starting to think that McGovern was beat up enough about the Defender that I think that he might have been hands off over the last couple of years, or maybe has loosened up his demands on styling. That I'm a little more hopeful these days that the Defender will not be as jarring as some of the other designs we've seen.
People bash on Jerry, really?
Thy name is Harold.
Certainly, I've heard that the Defender will. What was the phrase that somebody told me the other day? It will hark back to the Defender in the same way that the current Wrangler harks back to what you might think of as the classic Wrangler style. Yes, so they are mindful of that sort of need to be. I won't use the word cosmetically, but certainly it will look like a Defender. That's what I've been told.
See, if that's true, then that confirms what I thought, which is, Jerry has said a number of times that it will be completely different, striking, and it will be polarizing. And if what you're saying is true, then it kind of supports my theory that they said, Jerry, you've done a great job with all these other models. You've moved up the state of styling. We're selling Land Rovers like hotcakes. We're getting closer to our 1 million vehicle a year production line.
Sure.
And but on this one, we're putting you aside, brother. We're you're okay. Let us. We're going to deal with this. And if that's that certainly makes a case that maybe that has in fact happened.
Like he's been overruled in his thought that it doesn't need to look like the old Defender.
Yeah, that was it. Thank you. Yeah, he did actually say, "I'm not making a retro design," and it sounds like it may in fact be a retro design.
Right. Yeah, he said it was all new and it would be appealing and we would like it. And apparently someone has said no.
Yeah. It's. I think one of those cars like a Porsche 911 or a Beetle or a Mini or a Mustang or a Wrangler that has such an iconic quality that whatever they do, it will be wrong for somebody. But they have to try and get it as right as they can.
You're right. Well, and the overriding thing is, at this point, if they were to never make the Defender again, Land Rover would continue and would be successful.
Yes.
They don't.
Yes.
Right.
Really
but they'd be doing it without their halo.
Yes.
Well,
It's like
that's what we say without their halo. I don't think I don't.
Well,
think...
but see, the Defender has always been, the Defender and or the series truck. That whole lineage has been the halo for Land Rover. It's their halo vehicle.
No, but I don't think it is anymore. I think it was. But
but I think it needs to be, and that's why I say if they don't do the Defender the way they should, they'll be like you say, they will survive, but without their halo.
Yeah. Certainly, Discovery has moved into the limelight it was presented in the UK for a long time as the vehicle that saved Land Rover.
No, I believe that's true. I mean, the Freelander was a vehicle that helped save Land Rover, best-selling vehicle for a long time. Then the newer Discos did well, and then the Evoque, and now Disco Sport is the best-selling Land Rover in the world.
Yeah, sure. But at the time when there was an increasing dominance of Japanese vehicles and Defender sales were dropping in the 80s and into the 90s, that sort of Discovery stepped in and said, well, this is the new Land Rover for the new millennium, and this is the new market we're going to address. I suppose it was started with the Range Rover, and Discovery stepped in when Range Rover moved up market.
Right.
Discovery stepped in to be the farmer's family car.
The Discovery plugged a big hole in their lineup between the high-end Range Rover and the low-end Defender.
Oh yeah. As a kid in the 70s, when you saw the farmer at work, he was in his series truck, he was in his series truck. But when he was going away with the family at the weekends, it'd be in his Range Rover, and his Range Rover then was an SUV stroke family car. It wasn't as upmarket as it is now, but it's been moved out of that market segment by its own success.
Right.
And so they've had to plug that in something. But ironically, Discovery's moved up market as well, I suppose, which is why Evoque and Discovery Sport have come in to try and bring in a more affordable family Land Rover for everybody else.
Yep.
Well, and I'm afraid the Defender has moved up market as well.
Yes,
there
right.
really is no low-end Land Rover product. Period.
Yeah, you're right. And this is something that's being lamented on both sides of the Atlantic, I think. How much is the new Defender going to be? I'll never have one. This sort of commentary,
Do you anticipate you'll be driving one of the first models of the new Defender?
I'd like to, which I suppose anybody would say. I have been lucky with my contacts at Land Rover and things that I've driven and written about. I would hope it's a possibility, and I would hope I'd be realistic enough about its intended market and its intended niche in the market, not to be coming up with any knee-jerk reactions. But yeah.
Well, hopefully after you do that and you write your article, then you come on the show and you talk to us about it.
Well, bless you. I'd like that very much.
Because you're probably the person that's going to be close enough to driving one of the newer ones that we know.
Well, I'm not. I think a lot of people are viewing it with horror and thinking, what is this thing? But and certainly comments on social media are oh, it looks awful, and I'd never want to drive one, and so on. But we have to move forward. This vehicle will no doubt be very successful. Will sell large numbers of units, and will have its hardcore off-road use and off-road users. And so, yeah, I'd love to know what it's like, and I'm sure with the amount of thought that's going into it, it will be spectacular. There are a lot of dyed-in-the-wool Defender lovers at Solihull who work in the factory, and they will be very determined to leave their mark on this vehicle. So I wouldn't write it off at all in terms of what it's going to mean for the company now and in the future.
No, I think it's going to be capable. That's never been an arguing point there. We had a guest on the show a few months ago who had the opportunity to drive the D5 when it first came out at a Land Rover Experience event. And first thing he said was, I went there expecting to hate it. Mm. And he walked away just so impressed with what it was able to do.
Yes. Yeah, it's a superb thing. As you say, it doesn't look particularly striking in its initial premise, but as soon as you get it off the beaten track, it's a spectacular vehicle.
Although interestingly, most owners never really look at it from the outside; they're usually sitting in the driver's seat. So.
Yes. Yeah.
But interesting, you mentioned about the workers that work on the Defender or will. It sounds like they're not going to be in the UK, though. It sounds like they're going to be producing this vehicle in Slovakia. Of course, it'll probably mainly be done by robots. It's going to be kind of an interesting little angle to the story that there is that passion by the workers, which, having seen them built, I understand that, the original Defender, and that was another reason why you want to change the Defender and how it's built, because it was all done by hand. And, you want better reliability and you want to produce more faster. You do need to kind of automate it. But interesting that you say that about the workers, when those workers there's going to be less of them, and they're not going to be in the traditional manufacturing location.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you've hit as a Brit, you've hit a sore spot there, because, of course, at the moment there's all the negotiations about Brexit and UK manufacturing and Jaguar Land Rover moving out of the UK, and this is a real storm in a teacup, actually, as to where Land Rover will be manufactured, where Range Rover will be manufactured. Will it even be a British company anymore? And this sort of thing. So you're absolutely right. And I was really thinking back to the day when the final Defender, the final existing, if you like, model Defender was made a couple of years ago, and they had a Bring Your Defender to Work day at Solihull to sort of see the model off. And there was a huge number of Defenders and Discoveries turned up, owned by the employees. But you're absolutely right in that will now be changing, and the designers and the actual shops, the actual shop floor workers probably won't be Land Rover drivers, or less of them. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things move forward over the next couple of months. Hard to call that one.
I know, indeed.
As to where it's going to be built, and there will be lots of shockwaves about it, certainly.
On a technical side, will there be a manual version of the new Defender? Is anybody aware of that? Or does anybody know?
I would be very surprised if there wasn't.
I would too.
But it won't be available here.
No, certainly in the European market and in the UK, manuals outsell automatics by a huge number. But yeah, whether it's available in the States, I don't know. There will be a manual version, yeah.
There's not been a manual transmission Land Rover product available here since 1997.
Wow, right. Okay. Gosh.
Well, I was thinking more globally. It seems that the fuel efficiency of the manual compared to the automatic are almost even these days, and especially when you've got 9 gears and those things happening, that I don't know that the sales, and I should have done some research ahead of time, but I didn't think of the question until now. I don't know that the sales are that different anymore between manual and automatic in Europe. I thought I heard that they're a little more even, just as the diesel sales have changed also. I just tend to think that it might be easier if you're producing a vehicle in mass. You make them all. You're going to make them all very close to be the same with some variations. Does the Disco 5 have a manual? Is it available in manual rest of the world outside of the U.S.? Because that's actually.
I'd need to check that. I believe it is, but I'd need to check that.
And there's your answer at the Defender, because they're going to be the same platform.
The same platform, yeah, sure, exactly, yeah.
I mean, and related to that is, they've been testing the the capability of the new Defender for years now in the Disco 5 and probably the Disco 4 by testing that for years. What are any thoughts on changing propulsion and fuel systems? It seems like diesel's certainly having some trouble these days. Gasoline engines have gotten much better in their efficiency and their power, and of course, move to electric vehicles. Land Rover is slow to embrace some of these things, although they have to. 2020, there's some countries that are going to eliminate the internal combustion engine for new vehicles.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one, isn't it? I mean, I was lucky enough to drive the Defender EV a couple of years ago. I was hugely impressed by the vehicle and particularly by the amount of torque that it delivered, because they said, well, you're a desert guy, aren't you? Have a go at it in the soft sand. And they took me to, I think it was the Gaydon Proving Facility in Warwickshire, where they have a kind of mock desert, if you like. And I drove this thing in very soft sand where a petrol vehicle would have been fighting, and this thing was just phenomenal. It got on with it. And original Defender being what it is, you could certainly imagine a modular engine taking the place of a diesel. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, they must be planning for it, and they must be planning for some sort of hybrid or electric version. You're right that they've been slow at moving into that market, and I've heard all sorts of things about the Range Rover PHEV and limited range and that sort of thing. But yeah, I think they must be planning in quite a major way to move into alternative power plants. Yeah.
Kind of curious your thoughts, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Britain is banning internal combustion engines in 2040. I think that's the date I heard, which over 20 years away, but it's really not that far away at the same time.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Have you heard of the Bollinger?
Yes, I have. Yes, it's the boxy-looking...
basically, like all electric, boxy-looking Defender from America. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
it's really cool, and it almost seems like that actually, if it's done right, I suspect might outsell the new Defender here in the U.S. if Bollinger has all those, has the ability to produce and
assuming their financials are in order. The cool thing about the Bollinger is they're trying to market it to contractors, guys that build stuff, because it has multiple tailgates in it, including a tailgate, if you will, in the bulkhead, and you can because where the engine would be is open space. It's a front trunk, because all the batteries and everything are down low. So you can open up all these tailgates and slide long lumber all the way through the truck.
What a good idea. What a good idea. Yeah. And ladders and all sorts. Yeah.
All those long, sticky things that builders like to have to carry.
As I also think is with those things happening, why I think we're at peak automobile in the world. Automated vehicles are coming in. We have this, Land Rover trying to become a major player. Move to 1 million vehicles a year. Changing their iconic Halo vehicle, changing your power plant's mechanism. Your engine type, and then you have automated vehicles kind of coming in, and it's probably going to hit everybody in the face with. And I think that's it's a fascinating time to be alive in the automotive world, I believe, because things are going to as everything rapidly changes with technology.
Yes,
it's happening, and I don't know that everybody's prepared for the change in transportation that I think personally think is coming.
I think that apparently there's a traditional curse in China. May you live in interesting times. I think we live in interesting times in the automotive world at the moment.
I think it's a great time to be a spectator. Maybe not a great time to be a player.
Yeah,
that's true.
Absolutely. Yeah,
it's a great time to be a driver, someone who enjoys driving. I think that's definitely the case. Yeah, if you're a manufacturer, whether you're General Motors or Toyota or Land Rover, I mean, it's got to be challenging to anticipate what's coming and service all your markets and anticipate with the new markets that are coming. And do you eliminate the manual transmission because they don't sell as well, but you have this traditional market of people who really want them, and is it really worth the cost? And
being paid to make the call is not a job I'd want.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. If you get it wrong, you get one thing wrong. You style a vehicle incorrectly, or, you eliminate some feature that people really want. You could lose sales for a decade.
Exactly. or be responsible for the change in fortunes of a company.
Yeah, you decide to lie to people about having diesel emissions. Yeah.
Yeah, for instance. Yes.
Yeah. To pick an example, yeah.
Lie to people about the emissions of your vehicle, and at the same time be running this massive marketing campaign about how clean diesel fuel technology is.
Yeah. Yes.
There is that. So, Sam, you have a great website with lots of photos. That's how I kind of first found you, was on Twitter, and you seem to put out, I don't know, about 2 or 3 photos every day. They always seem to be several years in different time.
I try to.
It's not current stuff. How do you select that? Like, what do you just have a random selector, or do you every day go in and pick 2 or 3 from a couple of years ago?
Spins the big prize wheel, and whatever comes up.
To be honest, I mean, it's as much for my morale as it is for people that look at it from outside. And I'm most pleased when somebody emails me or tweets and says, these are, these keep me going when I'm at work, or these remind me of what the like when I'm stuck on the hamster wheel of chasing the daily dollar. And it does the same thing for me. And so I will, look through photographs and think, oh, I remember that one, or I remember the smell of that campfire, or I remember that forest, or that friend, or whatever. And it's purely what takes my fancy that day, to be honest. If I feel there've been too many desert ones, I'll throw in some forests or mountains or something like that, or Times Square or something. So yeah, it's there's no automatic selection. It's me just looking at pictures and thinking, oh, I remember that one. That's what drives it.
Kind of like how the Defender was built by hand.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
You do have way too much desert content right now.
Well, I live in a desert country. Yes, you're right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment from Sri Lanka, which is a bit more sort of bush and jungle. But yes, there's an awful lot of desert stuff on there. I've just come back from the desert today, actually, so there's some desert stuff going on there right now. But yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen you post your Canada pictures. There's some nice greenery there.
Yeah, there are. That was the Ottawa Valley Land Rover guys, who were a great bunch of blokes.
Yes,
and that was yeah.
Yep. Did you get to the birthday party?
No, sadly not.
Okay. I was just curious.
No, I didn't.
When were you there?
I need to get back, actually. Say again?
Oh, when were you in Canada?
Oh, only a week, something like that. Just crossed over the border from the States. And it was part of the supposed coast-to-coast drive in my friend's 110 that died of death. So
when was this?
So it was only a few months. This was 2016. It was my friend in the State Department who brought his 110 over to the East Coast, intending to drive it across. And he'd had the 110 rebuilt in Egypt, and to make it legal to import into the States, he'd had to leave the original engine in it. And the original engine was rebuilt to the extent that it was only suitable for really driving into a container one end and driving out of a container at the other end. The plan being
it was rebuilt. It was rebuilt with a hose and a can of detergent, right?
Some gaffer tape, exactly. And the plan was that as soon as it hit the ground in the States and got registered, then the 4-cylinder would come out and a V8 would go in. And we told him in Egypt, look, this engine really isn't suitable for any long trips. I think a crack in the block had been welded up and some other stuff. But yeah, exactly. But he ran into various bureaucratic problems with shipping the vehicle from where he was posted in Cambodia. Because the vehicle had gone from Cairo to Cambodia. So he ran into problems shipping it from Cambodia back to the States. He was supposed to ship it with a V8, but unfortunately the V8 was delayed. So we had to try and do this trip with the 4-cylinder that was in it, and it wasn't up to it. It got as far as Iowa.
Dear.
Yeah, it got as far as Iowa before it died. But on the way, we had a good run. But that was the vehicle that I got pulled over in Maine by the police officer in the Charger, because I was driving too slowly.
All right, that explains it.
Is that the one that was in Times Square?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's a cool photo.
I don't think you could see it at the time, but there was no hood on it. But yeah, the photo was taken from an angle where you couldn't see there was no hood on the engine, but the hood flew off.
I remember that story now. I do remember seeing those photos of that with the hood off. That's right, because it made a little bit of a splash, I believe, in the Twitter sphere at the time. Yeah.
Did it really? Yes. Okay. Yeah, made a splash in a river in New York State as well.
Yep.
Well, I wish we had known you at that time, because we were probably on your journey. You probably passed through, or at least close to Pittsburgh.
Pretty well, we did actually. Yes, we did. Well, yeah, I'm planning to come back over, so I'll come and give you guys a shout.
Absolutely, because we're not far from Ottawa Valley. I've been to the birthday party. It's been probably 10 years since I've been to the birthday party at Ottawa Valley Land Rovers, but it's a 6-hour drive. It's not that bad. There's a big event,
unless you're in a Series 1.
True.
Yeah, right.
But
that's a tough drive.
But there is a cool lake crossing you should take on a ferry. That's kind of fun.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And there's a big event in called MAR that happens in early October.
That's right.
In Virginia.
That's right.
And
Mid-Atlantic Rally.
Events. Yep, exactly. And those are all cool things that if you come over, we'll plan it. You're welcome to use my home as a base of operations if necessary. So.
Oh, bless you. That's kind. Yes. That's very kind. Thank you.
Yeah, because it was I had the Bells here for 2 weeks. So.
Oh yes, Graham and Louisa. Yeah.
I ate well. I had fried banana for the first time. It was very exciting. It's good.
You're still lacking or feeling the loss of your tea servant, though, aren't you, John?
Yes, I am. Yeah, he grew up. His name is Keelan, and the tea guy. He would make
your house boy.
Yeah. He volunteered. He was a very nice gentleman who would make tea for him. It's fantastic. It was nice.
Fantastic.
It was indeed. Well, you can find Sam on Twitter in particular at Sam Watson _. Is that right? Is that an underscore? Is that just one or two underscores?
I think it's very kind of you to mention it. I think it's 2 underscores. Yes, Sam Watson _. Yeah. Yep. And I think there's some sort of Land Rover in the picture. So yeah, you can see it.
There is, and we'll have a link from our show notes on the webpage. And your website is Zerzura.me.
Zerzura. That's right. Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, again, a long story, but in Cairo in the 1700s, you could apparently buy lots of treasure hunters' guides where you could find these books that would supposedly tell you where you could find treasure in lost oases in the desert. And one of these that was a bit more enduring than other stories was this lost oasis called Zerzura, which was still searched for with some sort of serious intent into the 1940s. And it was supposedly in Egypt somewhere. Long story, but the location of it has probably been narrowed down to some valleys in the south of Egypt now, which have dried up and lost their water source. But they were probably the origin of the myth. It's the idea that somewhere out there there's still an unmapped, uncharted part of the world, and that's got this vague name of Zerzura. So yes, that's Zerzura.me.
That's cool.
A bit geography nerdy, but yeah.
It's perfect. Nothing wrong with that. Zerzura sounds like a really, really neat concept and idea. That's your website. You're also a writer for LRO magazine. Actually, you have a column. Is that not the case? You're fortunately not as familiar with LRO as much as I should be because we're here in the U.S., but we have listeners around the world. They probably read you routinely. How did your column come about?
Sorry. They were kind enough to give me a column every month called the Overlander, and what I try to do there is to provide a kind of heads-up news service for travellers, where I talk about news to do with border crossings that are open or closed, or issues to do with disease outbreaks. So, for example, you might need to consider taking malaria meds in a part of Africa or Asia that you wouldn't have done before, or a new ferry service, or difficulties with paperwork, or changes in the world of vehicle-dependent travel, which aren't really advertised at a central source anywhere else. And it seems to have been well received. It also covers decent reports of decent and less than decent reports of Land Rover garages. So if a traveller has found a garage or a mechanic that's particularly good in a country, then I'll mention that. Or another one, for example, to avoid, I'll mention that. So there was a typical example recently. There was a garage in northern Tanzania where the diesel fuel tank in the forecourt had a crack in it. And so if you filled up with diesel from there, and it was one of the first garages you met as a traveler traveling into Tanzania, if you filled up with diesel there, you were taking on about 30% of water. And so friends in Pumas were having problems because the water separator was being overwhelmed and they had to strip the fuel system down. And this is the kind of thing I try to alert travelers to through the column, things that they should know. And of course, this changes regularly, and people are out there traveling in Land Rovers all the time. So I try to feed back their experiences into the public domain that way, as well as throwing in some travel logs and some stories of my own. So it's always evolving.
Cool. And folks can find you in LRO magazine.
That's right.
And it's available. I believe it's available online. I know there's an app for it, in addition to being available online and in print, so you can check that out. And you have a very cool website that has all your pictures. So if you don't want to wait for Sam to post a photo through Twitter, you can go out to his website, which is zazura.me. Of course, I'll have a link to it from our show notes. And you can check out Cambodia, Jordan, Sri Lanka, Nepal, USA, Tanzania, and Nepal. I like the Nepal photos because it's probably the most... Of the at least places you've been, it seems like the most unique. Most people probably don't get to see often is Nepal. Just amazing.
It's an awesome place. Yeah. It's an awesome place with fantastic people. Tailor-made for Land Rovers, really. Yeah.
I like the Yak Donald's bumper sticker.
Yeah, that
nice.
Turned my head, I must admit. Yeah. Yeah.
They're everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little interesting note. You know the Big Mac.
Yes.
That comes from Western Pennsylvania.
Really?
It does.
What's the story there?
Some guy.
It was a franchisee came up with because at the time they were just hamburgers and cheeseburgers, and a franchisee here in Western PA just decided he was going to do something a little extra special, and it caught on.
Right. Wow. I didn't know that. Fantastic. Right.
I live 2 miles, actually a mile. I'm a mile from the Big Mac Museum.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And yes, there is such a thing.
It's basically a giant plastic Big Mac inside of a McDonald's.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, not heavily curated.
No.
I can imagine.
It's the ancestral home.
I once convinced a group of 12-year-old Egyptian schoolboys that Pennsylvania was where pencils were invented, and that was a claim to fame for a long time.
Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh in particular, I'm a history fan. Great connection to the UK. Pittsburgh, of course, named after William Pitt the Elder, the Prime Minister of the UK. Mm-hmm. And there's also a William Pitt named after William Pitt, who was incarcerated in the Tower of London. They're like, here, have some land, go away, go to North America, please leave. So Pennsylvania is woods, so it's Penn's Woods.
And some of my ancestors got a land grant from Mr. Penn 300 years ago.
Wow.
Settled in the middle of the state somewhere.
Wow.
And
very cool.
Yeah, and George Washington kicked off the Great War for Empire, the French and Indian War, the 30 Years' War, really the First World War. Kicked that off here in near Uniontown, Pennsylvania, which is
yeah, okay,
45-minute drive now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
And back when he was a colonel, he was stationed in a little town of Ligonier, where I owned a house at one time, just a couple blocks from the fort.
All right, fantastic.
I suspect at some point he peed in my backyard.
No, not many people can say that. Yeah.
Anyways.
Can't prove it, but
I'm sure he peed somewhere, Harold.
Yes.
He had to.
Yes.
Yes. Whilst doing something important.
That's right. Anyways, we go on with the history. I enjoy history, and there's that. And the other thing that you may not know, Sam, is history and vehicle history, and this also connects back to the UK and Land Rovers. Is the Bantam Jeeps started in Butler, PA, which is an hour north of Pittsburgh. Yes.
Right. Fantastic.
So actually,
right. Were it not for Bantam Motors, actually Bantam started as a licensed producer of the Austin 7. If you really want to go back to DNA,
Really?
Yeah, but if it were not for Bantam coming out with inventing the Jeep, if you will,
yes,
there would be no Jeep and there would be no Land Rover.
Yes, exactly. A friend of mine imported 2 1943 Jeeps, a Willys and a Ford, from the States, and then we took them into Egypt and drove them 2,000 miles through the desert about 5 years ago. And that was, I've got a great deal of time for those little old Jeeps and super things.
Every year in June, early June, they now have the Bantam Jeep Festival in Butler, PA.
Really?
You may want to tie a visit to the U.S., and there could be a good story for you
that would be great.
Of Bantam Jeeps and their connection to Land Rovers, and so that. And there's a lot of bashing, especially here in the U.S., back and forth between Land Rover and Jeep. But I always like to tell people they're related. So
yes,
be mindful.
Yes, yeah. Oh, very much so. Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Sam, thanks for coming on the show. It was fantastic to finally talk with you, and we've been trying to do this for, I think, years on and off. I'm going to give Malcolm the credit for finally pushing you over the edge to come on the show.
It's very good to talk to you both and hopefully meet you in the flesh before long. Thank you for the opportunity, guys.
Absolutely. I'll buy you a beer.
I'll buy you one. Take care.
And that's the podcast for January 2019. I want to thank our special guest this month, Sam Watson. Thanks, Sam, for talking with us finally on the show. Also, thanks to Abel Rovertor for his generosity in selling Range Rover Classic winch trays to help support the podcast. And also thanks to the One True Pax for his continued production support. Thanks, Pax. We really do appreciate it. And thanks, guys, for coming on the show. And Harold, appreciate it as always. Welcome back, Michael and Morgan, for coming back on the show. I don't need the name sticker anymore. You can find. You can find.
Only took you 6 years.
Only took 6 years, and him not coming on the show for 6 months, right? You can find. Michael is the owner and operator of JustBritish.com for all of your British. See if I can get this right without any notes. Your classic British car needs.
That's good enough.
Okay.
Get your sticker though. I'll send you a sticker.
Thanks.
But yeah, come on by justbritish.com. We'd love to have everybody. We have not only classic, but new car news and Land Rover news and all other British vehicle news.
You need to put that on not on a sticker, but on a Post-it note so John can put it on his monitor.
I will send him a custom Post-it note.
There you go.
And you can visit our website, Centresteer.com, to listen to previous shows and for show notes, which have links to the stories discussed in today's shows, all the videos and articles. We are part of the 4x4 Radio Network, and I invite you to check out the other 4x4 related shows at 4x4radionetwork.com. You can connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and email. You can directly support the show at patreon.com/Centresteer. If you're not a subscriber to the podcast itself, you can do so you can get the show automatically show up in your pod catcher, pod application, whatever we're calling them these days. And if you're at the main winter rump, say hi. I'll be there, and I'll sell you a T-shirt. How about that? Thank you for listening to show number 70. Harold, when's our next anniversary? April?
April will be episode 73.
73. Oh, jeez. Okay. And I hope you enjoyed.
6 years. 6 years as of March.
I apologize, everybody. I just stopped on that thinking about it. I probably shouldn't have, but there I did. Thanks for listening to show number 70, and I hope you enjoyed it. We'd love to hear from you and what you're up to in your Land Rover. Until next time, ask you to share the show with one other Land Rover enthusiast.
And you may now resume your important things.
Sorry, I was muted. I don't know how I did that.